I had about that. I said, I know one.
Bite.
I mean.
It's good.
And there's Iris.
Exciting.
That already.
Have that.
Itty bitty bit of caffeine.
And.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did it
You know
have
how, like-
sharpness to it? The other ones didn't.
Yeah.
Sharp.
Always had a very small
It is. I think it's.
Breakfast is a little food.
amount to us. I started in 2003 for the first couple of years. We were still
Yeah.
then became super with that.
Stay here. Here.
You need a jump? You can look at mine.
Right now, we still have some there, but.
Pie charts.
But
I need to pie chart.
Oh my goodness, Connie. You know, your next is public records request over time. To see if they've been getting longer.
I think I'm gonna call this. It's kind of funny, isn't it?
I bet it has.
Oh, not really.
They were saying,
It's not funny, but I bet it's been getting more as people get used
Another one
Yeah.
today.
They're trying.
I got one up.
We're trying to do both the service.
the Justice Center.
Yeah, Justice Center and such, yeah, maybe.
I don't-
guess I haven't.
I didn't have a chance to ask, it was break during the meeting, so
I heard the candidate
I'd just be curious.
I think I'm
for the
gonna
finance director.
call him or, I know him well.
Like I don't just work.
Committees.
Okay, I heard that.
Only at the moment, only because
The Washburn.
it has to do,
Kirk too.
it's, funny, ain't it?
You know, I shared that out on my link. Supposed to. but-
We'll call this meeting to order. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting on May 15th.
That motion. I'll second that motion.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the May 15th Finance Committee minutes, signify by saying aye. Carried. Are there any public comments today? Any public comments? Hearing, we'll move on. Justin, you're up.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hey. So today, again, is really a follow-up to what we've been discussing kind of at the beginning of this year, where we've had multiple meetings, discussed different options, ran different scenarios, ultimately culminating to a plan of finance that has been kind of voiced by whether we're having the highway facility, the jail, or both. So we're trying to accommodate everything while at the same point mitigating interest rate risk, mitigating inflation risk, just overall accommodating all different aspects of it, while at the same point taking advantage of short-term interest rates that are at historic highs, as you know. So, trying to put together a long-term plan, factoring in your CIP, which is $3 million every other year, taking that into account while factoring in both these projects. I think we've come up with a very good plan. I think everyone can agree that, while we started at maybe a larger financing amount, you've been able to scale that back to the best of your ability. And we've looked at the higher cost at 38.5 for the jail. We've looked at, different options, and, as long as that jail stays at that 38.5 or 40 or less, we're in good shape based on what we've modeled out and looked at. So it's really at this point, ideally, it comes in at that 33.5. We're going to be using some fund balance to help reduce the project cost, because you are incurring a pretty significant amount of costs here to to do all the plans for these things in the amount of almost $2 million between the two. So, you know, at this point, you're invested in this project. And now it's really, okay, how do we make this happen? We've got plans. Now let's make this potentially happen here. So what I have in front of you today is that hybrid scenario that we discussed last time. Again, that was, you know, one scenario got voted down, another one kind of got voted to potentially move forward with some modifications, ultimately culminating with this hybrid and financing approach, where we're going to be able to get both projects essentially started, while the highway is going to be fully financed right away, and the jail being kind of phased over multiple phases, with the final phase ultimately, you know, do we need that full amount, or can we reduce it? Or, you know, ideally, you're earning a significant amount of money, and we're able to use that potential $1 million in investment earnings to help offset project costs related to these different items. So the first financing phase of this overall project, and again, it's multiple projects, is $33.5 million. It's going to fund it's going to be a general obligation promissory note, phase one. And this is going to fund the highway for the $16 million. So that's going to be that cost. The jail for 17.5. And, you know, that's the two projects. We put flexibility in the resolution to allow that if you needed to move money between projects, you have that ability to do so. And also, if for whatever reason you needed to shift a little bit to a CIP related project, you have that ability to do so, and vice versa. So it gives you max flexibility in that aspect. So again, this is just the start. The highway, that's going to be hopefully fully financed, but the jail is going to be multiple phases. And again, the goal there is to do get everything started, get the investments earning, because, you know, as you probably heard, the Fed did not reduce their rates yesterday, essentially. We kind of expected that, and we talked about that, you know, it was probably unlikely that they were going to do it, but there is talks by the end of this year that they may start looking at some rate cuts. I think that's more realistic. So to get the financing in place by the end of this year, get some of those investments locked in at the higher interest rate, because that is a direct impact. If the Fed starts cutting rates, the short-term rates will go down on your investments. So trying to lock in that at the 4.3 interest rate is a tremendous benefit to the county, and something that, are we going to see that type of interest rate, you know, going forward? I mean, we kind of were historic lows about 5 years ago for interest rates on long-term basis. That has since flipped. Now short-term rates have kind of been in there, you know, their prime, earning as much as they are. And we'll probably go back to a leveling type effect after this. So to take advantage of this opportunity is probably once in a while type situation. So this is going to be a 20-year financing maturing March 1, 2026 to 2045. First interest, March 1, 2026. The call date, March 1, 2034, or any date thereafter. So again, on that particular day, we can take a look at refinancing, paying it off. And if you recall, we've done this with the county where, you know, as interest rates in 2020, 2021 came down, we took advantage of that opportunity and refinanced and saved a tremendous amount of money. So this doesn't mean that you're locked into these type of rates forever. It's in about 9 years, you're going to have that ability to look at refinancing, paying it off, et cetera, if you so choose, and it makes economic sense to do so. So the estimated interest rate is a 4.75%. Again, hopefully a little conservative in that, but for planning purposes, like to be a little conservative. Interest rates, you know, continue to be volatile every day, but I feel like if we were in the market, we definitely would be under a 4.75%. Not to exceed interest rate of a 5.25%. So if all of a sudden things shoot up and, you know, something happens in the marketplace where it's just a dramatic event like we saw in April, then I probably want to just get in front of you and let you know what's going on with the municipal market, and maybe it makes sense to, instead of targeting, in October, November, maybe we just kind of play it by ear and wait and try, just make sure we close by the end of the year, but I just want to let you know what's going on in the marketplace if we start approaching that type of interest rate. So Finance Committee considers the plan of finance and parameters resolution for phase one today. County Board considers Finance Committee recommendation and adopts parameters resolution on June 24th. Ultimately, the parameters resolution gives the flexibility to lock in interest rates when we meet the parameters, and ultimately timing is optimal and we're ready. So again, there's a lot of steps in the process between now and October, as Ashley can attest. But we want to be in position to be nimble enough with the financing that if we see interest rates drop, that we have that opportunity to jump in while short-term rates are high, and we can kind of mix and match to get the best outcome for the county without taking too much risk. Because if we go too late in the year and we know we got to close, then we're kind of up against a wall as far as when we lock in the interest rate. So that's kind of that process, and it's the same process that we used last year and prior years. So the preparations are made for the issuance, official statement. That's again the stock, like a stock prospectus that contains all the financial information about the county, ultimately sent out to potential buyers. S&P rating, that's where myself, Ashley, and others will jump on a call with Standard & Poor's and talk about everything going on in the county. We'll talk about the long-term plan of finance and how that, all kind of jives together. Because ultimately they're looking to see, do we have a good long-term plan? We discussed a lot of this long-term plan with them last year. So they're aware of this, and they were comfortable still giving you the AA- bond credit rating after being upgraded in early 2021. So we're kind of we're on the upswing, which is great for when you're going into larger projects like this. I mean, to get an upgrade, that was tremendous. That was kind of like, that was a great moment. Knowing that we had these projects on the horizon here, because that's going to save the county and your taxpayers money. And then ultimately on the last rating call, when we went through the $6 million financing and then talked about, these larger plans, that they were comfortable based on our long-term plan that we had kind of laid out at that particular, which indicates that they shouldn't make any changes because they know what's coming. So the tentative sale would be potentially early as would be October, once those equalized valuation numbers come out. UR releases their valuations, equalized valuations in August. They're finalized in October. That'll give us a good indication to see, what you've grown by. Ideally more than what we're projecting, because I think we've been pretty conservative in our projections over the last couple of years, using around 2.5%. And you've been growing much higher. Now, is that sustainable to grow that fast, that quick no. But at the same point, we do want to see what that looks like before we were to jump in. And it's going to potentially help with that bond rating call too, to say, hey, we've been projecting 2.5, you grew by, 4, and we continue to look better than what we're projecting here. It's also going to be helpful for the planning of the mill rate, making sure that we understand what that valuation number looks like going into next year. So then the closing would occur by the end of this year. That would be the reason for that, is to kind of get this financing in place and then be able to take advantage of the bank qualified type financing in 2026 and 2027, as we've talked about in the past. So, because again, I don't know where interest rates are going to be in 1 year. I don't know where they're going to be in 2 years, but I do know where they are right now. And to lock in the majority of the financing now, when we know we can fit this all in the long-term plan for the county, that's the main reason why we're trying to get this first piece done the way it is. So if we go to page 3, this is what you've seen in the past, a lot of numbers on this page, but this is ultimately probably illustration number, I don't know, 150. You know, and it's funny because when I look back at 2022, when I met with the ad hoc master plan committee and we talked about these different projects, we talked about the facilities improvements, 5.4, jail of $10 million. Now it's, you know, so that just shows how inflation and costs continue to rise at a substantial rate. And that was 2022, remember, that was not too long ago. The law enforcement center, 15 million, and a justice center, 25 million. So that was kind of when we started looking at different numbers, and you can see that, you know, and you're not the only county that has faced these things where, you know, a couple of years ago, they were getting X numbers and now it's just higher because life is more expensive. And it's just, you know, continuing to be more expensive. So, you know, what's it going to be in a couple of years? I have no, that's not my expertise. But what I do know is that costs have been going up. So looking at this financing illustration, the left side of the page, that's your net existing debt service. So again, the planned drop from 25 to 26 was a multi-year kind of plan. We've been actually, since she started, we've been talking about this, and I talked about this with Kitsy, and, you know, and I mean, that was how many years ago where we knew these things were coming and we built this plan to have this nice drop. So ultimately to allow the tax impact to not be so dramatic that that you can't get these things potentially done here. So that has been prudent of the county to limit the borrowing, you know, try to have good fund balance over that period of time and be able to manage these projects. So that's kind of been a work in for the last several years. Then we move over to the right side. Just in that first kind of issue 1, that's exactly what we're talking about today. That's the phase 1 of the financing. So broken out into 2 pieces, the 17.5 million for the jail and the $16 million for the highway. So that gets both projects started, start paying invoices, and ideally that highway shop is completely financed because that's going to be a much faster build. So that those costs are going to be incurred pretty quick. Starting at the end of the year. Then the issue number 2, again, trying to keep that at $10 million or less for bank qualified purposes, because you do get a little bit better interest rate when you go out and you're considered a small issuer, meaning $10 million, which is kind of crazy, right? But that's in our world, $10 million or less is considered small in the municipal bond world. So issue number 2, $3 million for your CIP, whether that's 3 million, whether it's 2.5, whether, you know, that's just for planning purposes. That's going to be ultimately up to the board to decide what that amount is. But that's kind of what the goal has been over the last couple of years. So $3 million amortized over 10 years. And then the second piece of the jail, because again, you're gonna be burning through invoices and paying project costs, et cetera. You're going to need some additional funds to get you through 2026 and in 2027. So this gets you an additional $6.5 million. Now, are you going to spend that 6.5 day one? No. Again, that's where you're going to be investing the proceeds that you aren't spending day one. And it's also to avoid arbitrage rebate type concerns. So you're going to get the additional 6.5. That'll get you through about, you know, mid 2027 based on the draw schedules we've seen. Now, if you need it earlier, this is just for planning purposes. I mean, we're talking 2027. And so I have it just closing September of 2027 to get you the remaining funds of the $9.5 million. And that why I have that out as far as possible is because at that particular point, that's when you're going to kind of know what the final project cost is going to be for the jail. You know, whether you go through the contingencies, whether you don't, whether the investment earnings that we've earned, you know, as you know, $1 million or, you know, could be more. We use that potentially to reduce that final financing. Ideally, that final financing is not $9.5 million because you've got all these other things working for you during this period of time from the time we finance the first project to the time we get to that third phase. So but again, I'm assuming the whole thing is financed. You're not using any of those investment earnings for anything related to this project. And you will, you'll learn something. So that's where, again, hopefully conservative planning in this long-term plan. Then in the combined future debt service, that just essentially takes a $3 million financing every other year, amortizes it over 10 years, and just keeps, rolling it every 2 years. And that's where the debt service kind of looks like, and it kind of flattens out. Ultimately, on the right side of the page, that's what really kind of the taxpayers are going to potentially feel. And we've talked about this when I think we first started looking at different options. Actually, I think we were well above a dollar. We're almost $1.75-ish for these type of financings. And fortunately, with just with you guys, trying to drive down the project costs and so forth, also utilizing some of the fund balance, and we've been able to phase these projects out based on the draw schedule. We're able to basically have this be less than $1 to the taxpayers over the multiple years. So ultimately, you're at about $1.60 for debt service related to the mill rate. So $1.60 is kind of what you're paying on your debt service as of today. It's going to go up 30 cents, 30 cents, 20 cents, 18 cents. That gets us to that total impact over multiple years of 98 cents. And this assumes a 2.5% growth factor. Now, if you grow more than 2.5%, this mill rate will be less. If you grow less than 2.5%, this mill rate will be more. You've been growing at more than 2.5%. So this is ideally a pretty conservative projection. And ideally, if you get to 4%, 3.5%, whatever, 3%, this 98 cents goes to 97, 96 cents. But to be under $1, to get both these projects done, be done with them, and ideally, not have another large project for the county, long period of time, potentially 10 plus years. This gets it done. So when you look at 2036 and thereafter, you can see the mill rate start dropping a couple cents per year, because ultimately your debt service stays pretty flat and then starts dropping thereafter. So as you're growing and everything stays constant, your mill rate actually goes down on the debt service. We just need you to grow. So that's the financing plan. Any questions on that? We talked about it a number of times. And then I'll just finish off real quick with the general obligation borrowing capacity. So municipalities can borrow up to 5% of your equalized valuation. We've talked about that. You're in good shape going into these larger projects. The black bar in here, that's your outstanding general obligation principal outstanding. So you can see it's pretty small in this bar chart in the overall grand scheme of things. Your valuation at the end of 2024 was almost $2 billion. So $2 billion on 5% essentially is around $100 million in available borrowing capacity at any time. Once we factor in this 33.5 for the highway and the jail, that's the blue and the red. So that gets stacked on top of the outstanding black. You can see that everything over time is reduced because you're paying down your principal year over year. So that's why the reduction, year over year. We then stack on top the 2026 and 2026 CIP and jail, the 27 final piece of the 9.5 for the jail, and then the $3 million every other year thereafter. So we try to incorporate everything for transparency. Like this is everything that you have indicated, that we've foreseeable future. is all factored in. And the gray bars there on top, that's what you'll have remaining in capacity year over year, assuming that 2.5% growth factor. What I like about this compared to where we first started, which when we were looking at mill rates in the high dollars, 175-ish type range, the capacity was closer to like 25 to 30 type percent. And that was kind of a non-starter at that particular point. The county has grown pretty significantly over the last couple of years, allowing for this, this picture to look much better, because not only have you grown, you've kept your financing pretty low over those last several years. We refinanced a lot of debt. We kept the borrowing pretty minimal year over year. And that's allowed us to basically have, at the worst kind of point in this bar chart, to be at 43% remaining capacity. Kind of the target we talked about at one point was to always try to be around that 40% plus type range. And this plan allowed for that. So this gives me comfort that, one, we've got plenty of capacity. One, for the rating perspective, or when we talk to them, they'll appreciate that. Two, it protects you, in case something, devastating, unsuspected happens in the county where you need to finance something. This gives you plenty of capacity without potentially jeopardizing that bond credit rating. So you're in good shape, kind of looking forward, into the future. And while we have a lot of steps to kind of go from here to the day we have the hard hats on going through the building, this is kind of the first major step in authorizing the financing, because that ultimately gets you the funds to do the projects.
Justin, is the annual growth rate strictly figured off of valuation? So just go up. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I would say that property values is the main driver that we're seeing all over Wisconsin. I mean, everyone's home has gone up in value for the most part the last several years. Now, if you get developments to come in, that also helps. But the major driver of growth in Wisconsin is property values.
That was the stall out somewhere along the way. That could have 2.5.
Absolutely. And we saw that, and all around, Wisconsin and nationally, 2009, 10, or 11, the housing crisis type timeframe. Since then, we really haven't seen, too much, because it's home values have just slowly and then shot up for the last couple of years. But
My only concern is it took that big uptick a few years ago. Is it going to flatten?
yeah,
That scenario.
we looked at over the last 20 years, trying to take into account 2009, 10, 11, those really rough years. And still, when you take the average over the last 20, you're still above around 3.5% on a growth type annual rate.
Right now.
Yeah.
So
It takes the highs, it takes the lows.
2.5 should cover up bad.
Should.
Another question for you, the 3 million every other year. Person wasn't to borrow that. What impact do you have? It might be hard for you to tell me what that have on this.
Yeah, that might be difficult to tell you right now. It wouldn't have much of an impact that way.
I was just thinking every other year, 3 million. Take it over the term of this loan.
Yeah.
It ends up being 30 million.
Yeah, I mean,
But if it's spaced out like you're saying,
because you're paying down. And so when you look at these numbers, and there's a lot of numbers, but in the combined future debt service, you can see it kind of levels out around that 1,850,000 type number. So that's ultimately where you're going to stay. And it makes sense, because, every other year, $1.5 million Plus you got some interest cost, factored in every year. So 1,500,000 or 1,850,000, 5 is kind of where it factors in principal and interest on an annual basis every year going forward. And you can see that that mill rate is about, 56 cents in total for that debt service in that final year in 2048. So that's when all the other projects' debt will be coming off the books. By 2047 is the final year based on this long-term plan of the building related projects.
Any other questions?
Does that answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, it did. I'm just trying to think of another one while I got you here. Do most counties do this before they have, I understand that there's a process and you gotta keep the ball rolling. I mean, I have some problems with these numbers. The fact that I heard 33.5 for the jail, the highway's fairly fresh. Where my concern comes in, I've heard 33.5 for the jail, but that's kind of a number I've been hearing for probably a year and a half. But yet when we talk about it, it's like, you gotta do this now. I get it from the interest rates. Like, you gotta do this now because costs are going up. I can't remember the percentage. But this number hasn't changed and we don't have hard figures back yet until they get done with the design, I'm going to assume. So what happens if this comes back and it ends in, say, board approves this and come, I think they were talking, 6 months before they have the jail really, the design and stuff done on it, wasn't it something? And it ends up being 38. Or 40.
Absolutely. And all good questions. Great questions. And that's kind of why we've ran some of those models up to almost $40 million. We've been looking at the 38.5. We know we've been planning. We have fund balance that honestly is a good use of some of that fund balance to an extent for these building related projects, because that's going to be your biggest bang for your buck is to use some of that fund balance. Now we have to be strategic about it, not to use too much. And we've had plenty of conversations about, what's the right mixture of that, but we want to potentially downsize some of the borrowing amount with that fund balance. So to your point, if it ends up being $40 million, one, we know that the impact wasn't dramatic. It was like 4 cents higher, I think, in total when we looked at the higher amount. So that wasn't a dramatic amount. But at the same point, that's where the investment money is going to come into play, because using a 3.5% growth or investment rate on this debt, we're going to earn around $1 million. And that was just modeled out. That's 3.5%. You can earn 4.36% in the LGIP right now, which I think is where the money, and so that could be significantly more, and that money should be used towards these building projects, whether it be reducing the final financing amount, using it towards just general project costs, whatever you decide, that money should be used towards these projects with the fund balance. So between the two, ideally even if it's 40, we come in less because we're using all these other sources of funds to reduce the financing. And this plan mitigates the risk that we're going to overborrow. Because instead of doing the full 33, and I understand it kind of, the full 33.5 million for the jail specifically right now, and then an additional 16 for the highway. What if we don't need that much, money? So by phasing it over periods of time, we know the jail is going to be more than $17.5 million. So the thought is, and this is where Kurt, because that's not my job. I don't know, but Kurt, has come in here and said he feels good about the numbers. at the 33.5. But if, you know, people make people wrong, people come in, you know, a little bit, you know, less, well, if it goes up to 40, we still have a plan. We thought through that. We know we can do this. And that's not abnormal that the project ends up being, you know, potentially a little bit more. But we've been able to do things leading up to this in many years in this planning to mitigate those type of concerns.
And on the other side.
They're not just coming at 50s. But
If there is, yeah, because then we're gonna be neck deep, with the news. If the way these notes here work, let's say there's 500,000, we end up under whatever at the end. That able to pay back on that, or what happened
You
when
would-
notes are issued?
Great question. So that's that issue number 3. We ideally are not going to finance that final piece until we are very certain what the final project cost is going to be. Because I do not want,
Off on
yes,
right up till like 6 months out from completion, where do you?
yeah, it would, I think based on these numbers, it was like 6 months. It was like 6 months, you should know what that final project amount is going to be.
As I'm practicing my active listening skills, if I heard you correctly just now, that means that the 9.5 million on issue 3 could potentially be a 7 or a 6 million, or maybe higher, but it could be potentially lower due to the interest gains or project cost savings.
Yes.
Okay.
If the project comes in at the 33.5 and $16 million, there is a very high likelihood that we will be reducing that final piece.
So I just want to back up and have a finance 101 question for you. You've mentioned arbitrage a couple of times. You explained that to
Absolutely.
somebody who isn't well versed.
So the IRS doesn't allow you to borrow $33.5 million for the entire jail day one and not spend it, you know, at a certain rate. So you need to meet spend down requirements, essentially. If you don't meet those spend down requirements, then the IRS is saying, well, you're taking advantage of this because you're borrowing on a tax exempt borrowing basis.
Yep.
But
So what are those spend down requirements?
so basically 6 months, you have to spend down 10%, 5% or something. You know, and then it goes to, you know, 50% within the first 18 months, and then 75% within the first, you know, 24 months. There's different requirements based on what you need to do. And that's where we've looked at different draw schedules to say, you can meet these things, and whether it's financing or paying for some of these invoices between now and when we do this financing, we could essentially finance this project, reimburse your general, but you're spending it on the project to meet those, that first requirement. And then you're going to be able to hit those other requirements. So we've looked at all that, but the basis of the question, what is arbitrage? It's the IRS saying, don't take advantage of us, and make sure that if you're going to be borrowing tax exempt bonds, that you can keep the money as long as you spend it down fast enough.
In other words, they would frown if we borrowed it for them, then else.
It would be frowned upon if we held that money and we didn't do the jail for 3 years.
Is does anybody know for sure if what the board authorized before for the 1.4 or whatever it was for the design phase, is that built into these numbers here? Where's that money planning on coming from? It was 1.2 and 165, if I remember correctly. So I'm just calling it 1.4.
That might be
Is
funded.
Is that the plan to come out of here?
I thought it was coming out of fund balance initially, wasn't it?
Is, yeah, we're pulling it from our reserves right now. And then the thought was, we have a reimbursement resolution in place. So ultimately, the board can decide, are we going to reimburse those costs to our general fund? Or are we going to lower our fund balance, as Justin suggested, to lower the impact to the taxpayer?
And the thought was that you would reimburse your general fund this year. So you essentially get replenished all the cash that you have. Wait until that final phase, phase 3, and then at that particular point, decide.
Back out from the,
Yep. Then we've met the spend down requirements and everything, and at that point, we can apply $1 million to whatever, 2 million, plus the investment, like, let's do that.
any other questions? For what?
No, I've been through this longer than probably anybody else with Justin too, so.
All right. Mr. Freeman?
Well, he answered the question that I had in mind, was whether or not that could be considered part of the spend down. So answered the question.
Further questions? Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Move on to the treasurer's report.
Oh. Talk about it in my report than I really normally would, but, so you can see where our balances are. Those are as the end of May 31st. Did have some CDs that came due at 8, and I just brought the fund for a general pool right now till I figure out the best plan of action. And since that time, so anyway, we have extra funds sitting in our general fund right now, which is still earning the 4.5%. So while I figure out a good course, plan of attack to do what to do with some of these funds, which I'm gonna lead into. So when I came into office, there's multiple spreadsheets that keeps track of all these different CDs and everything. I need one sheet, so that's what I'm working on. Like what's due when, what's our interest rate? Which when I totaled everything up, I was having some questions, and maybe just because I'm new, how, like, is there a percentage of funds that we should keep liquid and not locked into a CD is the question. I don't expect an answer right now, but if somebody knows, like, where can I learn that or whatever, that would be helpful for me. Because my opinion is, I think we have too much liquid right now. I also am discovering that we have some funds that are not insured. So that's the other piece of my project that I really digging into, like, right now. So, which is interesting to listen to his presentation. Well, that was another question I had, like how these liquid funds apply to these projects that are coming up. So I hate paying penalties and fees and all that kind of stuff. So that'll help me better look at things if I know some of that stuff. So that was good. Then, so in May, we earned a little over 4,000 between interest and penalties. And still haven't heard anything complaining the additional penalties. So that's going okay. June, we sent out 581 reminder delinquent notices. We've had some pay, but you know, that'll be reflected in next month's report. In the past, people got reminder letters and just kind of sparked the conversation. Other counties do postcards. Postage is going up, so we made the decision to just do postcards, which we did over 2,500 reminder postcards. And we're already seeing people pay already in June instead of July. So, I think out of the grand scheme of things, probably, I'd say a dozen phone calls, either concerns, complaints. In my mind, 12 out of 2,500, or if you say 3,000, I don't think that's bad for phone. So the other thing, tax deeds, right now we have 20 people that, well, as of when I did the report earlier this week. I know there's about 3 people that their payment is in process, but we don't give them the cut until it actually posts to the which is a good thing. So that's our tax deed people. In REM right now, we've got about 117 people. And again, we are having people pay. So those numbers should hopefully go down. And we're still working with the one from 2019. We're about $300 and
Where 300 remaining?
$300 for 2019.
Right. Yeah, I get that.
It'd be nice to have that up. I'm strongly encouraging, that one person. And if I'm not in the office, like all of us take turns and make sure we make those phone calls to that taxpayer. I think that's pretty much it, like the normal kind of things. And I don't know, do you want me to touch base on my catalyst? Or do you want me to wait until it's later in the agenda?
That is
I don't-
the LAV.
Land nav, sorry. It's changed many names and we all call it all 3 names all at once, so.
No, let's wait on.
Okay.
What are you currently seeing for interest rate? Have you signed up anything new?
Glad you asked me that, Jim. So one of the things, when I looked at ADM, because I hate paying fees. Just, it's my banking world, sorry. But I did, at the conference last week, we talked about interest rates, what people were thinking was going to happen. We need to start looking at the 2 and 3 year term instead of just getting that good rate right now. So I did reach out to ADM again and say, hey, can you give me a quote? What's 24 months? What's 36 months at? There's still going to be even after we pay the fees, we're still going to be 4% or higher. So, and at our conference, they were thinking, interest rate possibly, of course, nobody has the crystal ball, but possibly maybe going down to 3.5. So that's where the spreadsheet that I'm working on is like, when are these CDs due? So they're laddered pretty well, but our longest term out is next July. I think we need to be going longer, getting the best they can to ride out. So the feeling is,
I need to doing some shorter, sorry to cut you off, but the only thing I just was thinking of something. Some of these shorter ones you do, if the interest did go down and chose not to put them back in at the time, they possibly could be used for building going forward or something.
Correct.
If we so chose to do that versus taking it for a year or something.
right, so right now, as I'm thinking this week, and my sheet, we have basically 3 accounts. And I've included the pool. So the pool, we have a money market at Security Financial Bank and a money market at Farmers. All the 2 at Security Financial and Farmers follow the pool rate. But if the pool goes down, we have a lot of money in those funds. We have 13.9 million in that liquid, not locked in. I feel that's too high, and that's why I'm asking the question of, like, is there a standard now that we want to keep liquid? Because that 13.9 is not locked in. That's flexible.
How much do you have left in, you feel?
So overall, not considering the general checking and all, like the K9 and the OB, that kind of, We are at 20, overall 22.8 and some change of investments is what I would call it. And 13.9, or 13.4, I'm sorry, is liquid not locked in.
It was what, 22? 22.8?
22.8 and some change. So those are kind of my concern is covered by insurance.
60%.
Yeah, it's a little high.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable where this is in like my planning purposes.
Who, what's our annual burn rate? Or what do we usually spend?
Budget's about 33, 35 million in the total budget.
Guess I'd look in to see what's, maybe quiz some of the other counties, see how they,
They're a lot, ironically, a lot of the comment was they're using their local banks. So is Russ County. We're kind of getting to the point, we're not fully covered right now with our local banks. So that's where I want to meet with them and say, where are we at? Because like, I haven't found Security Financial Bank, I know what we're covered because I used to work there. So I knew there was this collateralized letter. Some of these other banks, I don't know if we have a letter. If we don't, if we're just going off the 250 FDIC. Yeah, so we do have some funds. Yeah, so my banking knowledge, there's Cedars programs out there. Basically what the ADM program is to spread this money out to make sure it's covered. Some of our local banks probably have that same service. So that's why I also want to dig into what our.
yeah, by all means.
So before I went all gung ho and start doing.
I
CDs and
remember
stuff,
years ago, or maybe it wasn't even that long, interest started going up, whenever it started going up, and we instructed Verna at that time, if it made more sense to pull one early and pay a penalty and get it locked in at a higher rate, we just,
And I did have a lead, one of our Price County treasurer, former banker too, so a bank in her community, she got an extremely good rate, and I made the comment to her, I'm like, I might want to be talking to your bank too. It was a very good rate. So that is another lead that I would like to explore, and it's Price County. To me, Price County, Sawyer County.
Keep it up north.
I agree with you, though, this has gotta be, we need to be protected here.
But I think your real question is there a state requirement that we maintain so much liquid
State or county policy.
Practice.
on
Right,
that, and above that, you can do whatever you want to with.
yeah, I want that, or I would, I would-
Like school boards and other government things have, they have to keep 3 months worth of expenditures or.
I say that's what I know from most counties. There's not a state statute that says like 20%, but most counties I know of keep at least three months in reserves.
do we have that like in
I
a
don't
rural
believe-
county policy or
I don't believe our.
Maybe that's
board members set
something-
That policy, yep.
for the future to get it in the policy? So if the question comes up again, it's. And I just ask because sometimes I don't know to look for things.
Well, hard to stay compliant with policy we don't have. Easy. Or I guess it's easy to be compliant. With policy.
Yeah, no matter what you do, you're right.
Yeah, I guess so, So 30, I mean, do we have that right now? Is that 13.4 then about 30% of our cash burn? So we would, that'd be about 4 months then. It'd be nice to put a couple million and get that 4% though.
I don't think many, like ADM does not go past 3 years. I don't believe, I guess, but really the consensus is people are not willing to gamble 4 and 5 months out. Those rates are not quite as good. So I think everybody's in the wait and see game. And that's why I think interest rates really aren't kind of moving either way, so. Good for us on our earning, but good for loan wise, but
Any other questions?
What, is there a way you could give us a recommendation of how much it would be meaningful to put into the 2 and 3 year account? So like if that number's under 4 million.
Right, and I can, once I finish my spreadsheet here, I really kind of started this today, and then I was like, oh, wait, I wonder how much we need for the jail, and so it's really,
It's really still rudimentary.
but once I get it done, I mean, can I just email to the finance group, or does it have to be on the budget or the agenda, and then wait to the next meeting? Like, cause you wouldn't be taking any action on it anyway. Once I get this done, like, I don't wanna do it wrong, but if there's a way for me to get it to you sooner to,
Don't think there's any issue with emailing to us.
Just for informational purposes
Yeah.
only. Yep, and
Yeah.
then just maybe state that in the email and then don't reply all and then,
Yeah.
yep.
So we don't have to direct her to do anything.
She's a constitutional officer.
Good. We believe in your ability to do your job.
thank you.
Creative coordinator.
Okay, so in your packet, the clerk has put in the profit and loss analysis for joint management, which is looking pretty good so far this year. Couple of things I wanted to note is that, like Missy, I did my report a week ago. Since then, we have received the utility reimbursement checks for Forest 1 and Forest 2 from the city of Ladysmith. So those numbers look much different now. You'll get that update, Brian, next Thursday. Were there any questions on joint management?
There was something it said. Says the Forest 2 building is showing a profit because the land lease for Indeck for Meadowbrook Road is coded to this building. Is that properly coded, or is that miscoded so it looks good, or what?
It has been coded like that forever. And the explanation I got was that Indeck used to lease Forest 2. So when they did the land lease, they just had everything coded to Forest 2. And then when Indeck moved out, they just kept coding the land lease to Forest 2.
Is that proper, correct?
I don't think so, but I mean, that would be up to the committee to
That was
determine
my
a new
question.
budget for that.
It just seemed, the way it was worded, that it's coded to there, but it's not, it's on Meadowbrook Road and it's.
Right, so if that would be, both forest buildings, technically, if you take the land lease out, are showing a loss on the year, and they showed a loss last year as well, just because they're vacant. Okay, and then profit and loss analysis on county property. I did add in from last month the Tony Rail Yard, just because we have started incurring expenses there. If you'll remember, Supervisor Biller gave an update, I think at the last meeting, that we had when that storm went through. We had damage to our jail elevator, and we also had damage to the scale out of the Tony Rail Yard. So we had some invoices come in for that. But we did see, when I renegotiated with Excel on the lease for 2025, I believe I increased their rent by 3%. I think that's what property approved. So we have plenty of revenue to cover that.
Does Excel just pay that rent annually?
They
Is that
pay it
lump sum?
quarterly.
Okay,
But yep, it's for.
Okay.
Let's see, some expenses for Gateway, which is the minor avenue building right here to our south, mainly maintenance expenses and utilities. And then on the old hospital site, the payment cleared for when we closed with HCA Charities, so that's showing as a revenue. And then the majority of the expenses there are for that clinic building and the utilities and maintenance. I believe Brett gave an update to property last month that new leaks keep popping up in the roof. So.
And that didn't cover the cost of fixing that?
No, that covered, I think most of those invoices are in. I'd have to double check with Brett, but his update was we fix one and we go there a month later and there's another one.
Whack-a-mole.
Yeah, kind of. Mhm.
The rubber roof or something?
Yeah, and then he said in order to get someone out to give a accurate quote on what it would be to replace that roof, you have to put a like skid steer up there to peel back all of the rock to get to the rubber.
Yep.
Yeah, so that would be quite expensive, but it sounds like we're getting to that point where we need maybe look at full replacement. Which he'll be bringing back to property,
Has
but
anyone rented that in a while?
that has been vacant since Marshfield moved out. It is occasionally used for sheriff training, but I don't think Bryce has been in there for months.
Has any committees talked about renting it out? Or putting it up to be rented out?
Yeah, that, was it Michael's wanted it and the committee said no to that. The problem with that is that the entire 19,000 square feet is, all the same utilities. So if you were, a lot of people who have expressed interest in needing some office space need like 1 or 2 offices. Well, okay, when we turn the heat on or the electricity on for you or the water on for you, unfortunately, there's no way to separate that cost for the entire 19,000 square feet. So then when people hear that, they're like, oh, nope, I don't want to have to pay to heat that if I'm only using 2 office spaces.
Yeah, if they turn into like a WeWork and.
Yep.
By the time it's probably down at a minimum right now, and by the time we would turn it up for the whole thing, even if we covered that for somebody to rent it, it's just gonna wash away the rent that we.
Mhm.
The roof.
What's that?
So you get somebody in there to pay for the roof just about with the rent.
It'd be nice to do something with that, at least have somebody use it or whatever, that could possibly take the whole thing.
And then this is just the updated amendments and transfers. The last special meeting that we had was the budget amendment to accept grant funding, and it was actually a positive budget amendment because it was revenue rather than an expenditure. So year to date, $151,509 worth of budget amendments that were not anticipated. And this is only for 2025. So what Noemi is going to talk about is going back to 2024. So none of that is reflected here.
Is,
Left.
is the variance ratio, is that appropriate to put against like the full, you said the full annual budget's 33 to 35 million?
It's 33 million. I looked it up. Yep.
Okay.
The 33 million is the total budget.
Okay, so,
And that's expenses before reimbursements.
okay,
So like, I don't know if you want to kind of chime in here and help me out, but like the reason we account for all 33 million when we talk about our full budget is because we can't necessarily bank on that grant funding, because if for some reason that goes away, we are still on the hook for having to pay for those costs. So a lot of people think that our budget is like the levy, which is not.
right. No, I was just looking to see if the variance was like the percent variance, right? So if that was high compared to the appropriate number.
Well, some of these.
It's out of control.
Yep, so 50,000 did come out of contingency, so that technically was budgeted. And then we did pull the 54.5 out of the general fund reserves. So this total number right down here, maybe I should have referred to it as unanticipated expenses.
Right.
More so, yeah.
It's still pretty minor compared to the overall budget.
Mhm.
We had set contingency at 350, wasn't it?
Or
three.
315.
Think of 300 for some reason.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jim.
We have departments.
Talk about contingency. Then someone has to come and get it.
All right. So we won't say,
That's
But
a
it's not
naughty,
used.
that's a naughty word.
all right, note taken.
And then if no one has any questions on that, Another item from Brett, something just for the finance committee to keep an eye on is that the visitor center's roof is also getting to a point where we might be recommending replacement here in the next year or two. The ad hoc committee will be meeting next week for updates from CUNY and Venture, and everything continues to go fine with our Lake Avenue property.
Questions? Like your report. Oh. Yes. All right. Mrs. Meyer.
So we sent out postcards for dog license and they've been coming in quite a bit. Kind of striked yeah, so they have a $5 fine right now. July 1st, they'll have it through December, they'll have a $30 fine. But letters are sent out in October from the animal control officer, which then will actually do like court proceedings if they don't get them paid. And they do get a fine. It's quite big. It's like $200. Marriage license, we are up to 21. We usually do between 60 and 70 a year, so there'll be more coming in. Our agendas, every month we're doing just 12 to 13 regular, but our interviews are we had, I think 10 and 3 we had to cancel. So we're up to, anywhere between 25 and 30 agendas. Our open records are all caught up. We were at 293 since July, and we don't do the sheriff's department, so there's even more there. So I did give you some graphs here. This one is just for the month. And this one is for the year. So show you exactly what we're kind of doing there. Some of them are really wasn't, and I checked with the district attorney. I called quite a few people to see what to do with like the ones where they had money due. That's even if it was $3, that person would not pay. So I had to leave it open because I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't getting an answer from anybody. So finally, the program went through and I talked to Granicus, and they actually, I can give them a deadline. So if they're not paid by a deadline, then I can close it out. So you'll see that, there was a couple that are 183.4, 163. That's what they were. I was waiting for payments. I didn't know what to do with them. So I have that figured out. Some open records might take a little bit longer if I'm waiting for counsel to tell me what to do with it, because some of it's time is sensitive. So stuff like that. A lot of like animal control now. I've been helping her out because stuff that I can do for her, I have the program, so I'm able to do some of her stuff too, so it takes some of the burden off of her. So if I can do it, I'll do it. So that's highway department's doing their own, resources doing their own, IT is doing their own. So we're doing well with it.
I noticed, and it might be a limitation of the program, but it gives you a metric of days open. Does it also record like hours or time spent? 'Cause I'm curious to see.
Days.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how many hours and if it's affecting our overall count. We need to plan for that in budgeting season.
Well, and you'll see, that's a lot.
Yeah. The same.
I knew I was getting 300. I knew I was getting over 300. And I needed the help. So this has been, since you guys have approved this program, you have no idea how much this has helped. It keeps track of everything. If there's an email that comes in, off of my program or just an email, somebody emails me, and that program will catch it and put it in.
But you.
It'll put it in there where it belongs. It catches it. And so it's kind of nice. So all the documentation is right there. It tells you when I worked on it. It does tell you everything. When I worked on it, who worked on it, who did all the work in that, if maybe Ashley and I both are working on something, it actually tells everything.
No,
Who made changes, who did what?
again, I'm really curious if the program does it, what kind of the hour impact and what it's doing to
I can,
our staff. Yeah.
yeah, I can take a good look. And some of it's not gonna tell you because they've got to research something. It's not, it won't, that program. It's just gonna be them uploading it or whatever. Oh. I mean, we can probably do something like that, but yeah, it's.
Cool.
Yeah, anything else?
Any questions?
Updating our appointment book again and that again, so try to keep track of everything and which committee is which committee and doing what to do. And, we are getting ready for elections as well, ordering stuff and getting set up for. So.
Thank you. Finance Director, Noemia.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me
Can't hear
okay?
you very well yet.
Oh, no?
I think they have it on the system.
How about now?
Switched our audio source. Can you just say something again?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Oh, nice.
Okay,
Yes.
nice and loud. Okay. Okay. All right, good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Good,
Doing well.
hopefully. All right, so I have the sales tax in your board packet. You'll have the sales tax recap. We run roughly 2 months behind, so we've collected through March. And compared to January through March of last year, we're down about 4% on collections compared to what we collected last year. And we're at 284,000 currently. Any questions on that one? Okay, and then next, the back taxes collection is also in your packet. So we have on here through May, $142,350 collected. And also compared to prior year, January through May, we are a little bit lower than last year. And any questions on back tax collections or sales taxes? And I can move right into the budget. So I believe you guys have these, I can share my screen. But you should have these budget reports. Let's see, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. Okay, so the only one that really shows concern where expenditures are over budget right now is the insurance. And that's because we have not done the annual allocation between the other funds, and that will happen this month. So next month, you should see that this year-to-date expenditure should be in line with budget. For the finance department, where our expenditures are lower than half, so we're doing pretty good compared to our budget. And for highway, we're also significantly below budget here. I think we're expecting some project expenses for this department coming. And then next, our cost allocation. So here we have our bucket of revenue, and I believe that allocation will happen later in the year as well. So there's no expenditures for this cost allocation yet. Next is the ICAA. We're only at 34,000 year-to-date expenditures, so significantly under our budget for now. The driver's escort, this one is at 79,000 and our budget is at 95,000. So we're doing good in this one as well. This one is related to those vehicle purchases and reimbursements. And I believe we found an entry that our revenues will match our expenditures on this because it is a reimbursement basis. So revenue should go up to match our expenses on this one. And then the clinic building, our expenditures are only at 3,000. We have a total budget of 27,000. So this one is doing well. Let's see. And then the RCMH building. I think this is the rental. So our revenues here and there's no expenses to date. And then the power line, no expenses to date. And our sales tax department is just showing our revenues at 284,000. And then our contingency account has the 50,000 that we've transferred earlier in the year. And there's our budget. I heard you guys talking about it. So our contingency budget was 300,000. And then debt service. So we've made our mid-year payment. So our expenses are at 2.5 million for debt service. Our central service costs were at 67,000, so almost half. So right in line where we should be at this time of year. Co-car, we're a little bit less than half, and we so far have collected almost all the revenues compared to expenses. And that's it. Any questions on the budget forms for 25?
Hey, I was looking at the debt service. I was curious because I'm still fairly new here. Was that 2.7 million the annual projected debt service, or is the annual projected debt service higher than that?
No, I believe the annual debt service is at the 2.7. And I believe the payments are made January and June. And so that's why,
Thank
yeah.
you, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have a question on the sales tax revenue.
Yeah,
The projected revenue is still 1.2, which is exactly equal to the budget.
okay.
Why wouldn't that be projected?
This number
During
down
nationals.
here.
Yeah, because right now you're telling us it's gonna be 4% down from last year. Is there a projection for the full year?
We can see if we can maybe add that in. Because part of it, sales tax, this one, I believe this line item is more of what we've budgeted. We budgeted at 1.2.
Yes.
And so it's not, I guess, not necessarily a projection.
Right, but when I look at the budget report, I
Mhm.
see the actual revenues from 2023 and 2024. So just as a, reference to where we're maybe headed for 2025, that would be a nice thing to see from my perspective.
Okay. Do like a percentage overall, yeah.
And then I had a question on the finance administration.
Uh-huh.
With all of the ins and outs from the different lines, I see that the projected is again equal to the budget. Is there any thought to actually doing a projection for those?
The back taxes, this one?
No. The finance administration budget. I believe it's like page 52.
That first one? No.
Because I'm looking at the finance page in the archives. And I see that, you know, that obviously there's no finance director currently. And you're a consultant, and that line had 0. So is there any thought to doing a projection for the full year?
We could do, yeah, we could probably do that.
Because again, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Any other questions? Guess not. Thank you, Noemi.
All right. I think I'm up next, but go ahead and if you need to.
We'll slide
lead me
right into that.
So let's see. Okay, so resolution to approve the contingency and general fund transfers. Okay, so I'm gonna bring it up in the packet. So let's see, and I'll share on screen. So this is the piece, so this is the resolution. And we had discussed some of these items in the previous meeting. So the finance committee has the authority to amend budgets that are within 10% of its budgeted expenditures and allocate contingency as long as funds don't exceed the amount allocated to contingency. So for fiscal year 24, we had contingency of 415,000. There was a transfer of 15,000, which left a balance of 400,000. So this first bucket, this first table, these are, and similar to our prior meeting, these were expenses in excess of revenues, but don't exceed their budget by 10%. So it doesn't need to go to the board, but it does need the finance committee approval. And in the last meeting, you guys had certain questions. We went back to some of the grant individuals and other staff to try to reconcile actual expenditures and try to find more revenue essentially, which we did. So it was good. So this is the result. So we were able to reconcile the sheriff and the jail assessment fund. So it all, for the jail line item here for the 77,000, a lot of that kind of rolled together. So this amount here, amount requested, these are the balances that are over expenditures, or excuse me, that exceed revenues. And so in the next column, the reason for the budget variance. So for the county clerk, there were election cost increases, and there was a decreased amount received from other municipalities that resulted in that 15,000 overage. And for the jail, this is something I think we had somebody from the sheriff and jail department last time discussing how there was significant amount of overtime and from jailer and dispatch perspective. This amount decreased from the last presentation, so it's only at 77,000 that it's over revenues. Next is the emergency management. That was over by $2,900 for increased subscription costs. And then lastly, the zoning is over by 17,000 for increase in bookkeeper costs. So any questions on this first table?
Did we have some overtime or something there? Where did that cost come from?
No, my belief is that, remember when we talked about that position was supposed to be mainly grant funded?
Yeah,
I think more of it was hitting the levy than was
then
anticipated.
what was
Because I don't believe that position was performing reimbursable work. I believe that position was doing a lot of levy-based work.
Then that had to offset some of the other issues with the grants?
I
Is
think
that what we're kind of getting at here?
contributed to some of the issues that Noemi will get into. Yeah,
Okay, there's more to come.
yes.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Any other questions? We can come back to this if if we don't answer your question later.
No, I'm good with what you covered so far there.
Okay. Okay, so then the next bucket here is for using contingency funds for expenses that exceeded revenue and that also exceeded budget by more than 10%. And so for this bucket, this will also need board approval, and there is a resolution in the packet for this one. So similar to our last meeting, some of these numbers have changed. Let's see, I'm actually gonna just compare. So we had some, and I don't want to skip down to the last bucket, but we have this last bucket here that we'll talk about. So some of these, some in the previous month, some of those line items ended up moving down and not needing contingency funds. So some of those went away. But what has stayed, the big changes from the last meeting was our health and human services cost here, which I'll explain in a minute. And let's see, 6.2. Our land information ended up going down. And I believe fairgrounds ended up being new. So in our reason for budget variance, so for Corp Counsel, there was an increased contract service cost that resulted in $16,000 more than what was budgeted, more than revenue, excuse me. And then for health and human services, some of the costs there, in particular, there's one line item that I was looking at that there's an increase, it almost doubled for health and human service costs for mental health services. And the way Fund 250 works is Fund 250 has, or I should say 109 department has a reserve balance of 200,000. And so to offset some of the costs for health and human services, we used some of that reserve balance of 100,000 so that we didn't have to use as much contingency. However, there's still remaining costs left. And so we didn't want to use all of the contingency funds for that 100-09 in our continuing appropriations. So we used what we could from contingency for these overages, which those overages resulted from those room and board. I have two of the invoices up because I'm not extremely familiar with what services
I
are being
remember right,
provided.
those are mandatory placements.
Yeah.
Then,
Okay, so for example, this is one of them, 20,148, and there's roughly 10 months worth of it. And so that's right there, that's 200,000. And that this line item in the budget, let's see, was the biggest one that went over, and it doubled. Let's see, do I have it up here? It is, sorry for jumping around. Oh no, that's not the one I want. I want this one. So let's see, this is a 3-year look over. So here, HHS, adult service, community mental health. So in 24, we had expenses of 522,000, whereas last year and the previous year was roughly 220,000. So this doubled, and that was one of the main pieces for this one to go over. Let's go back to this guy. Okay. So that's one of the big reasons for the Health and Human Services, and why we're using some contingency, and we've tried to use some of the reserve balance in 09 as well. So that's that main overage. And then any questions on that? I know that's a big one. That's the main one, really. And then going down further, so the Board of Adjustments went over by 24,000. It looks like our original budget was only 1,400, and that was related to legal counsel expenditures. The county board went over by 10,000 for attorney fees and printing costs being higher. Land information, this increased salaries for salary costs from the map tech by 16,000. The LEPC grant just had an increase in equipment costs by 136,000. The fairgrounds had an increase in repair and maintenance costs by 36,000. And then our WNEP had an increase in program costs for the $752 and $705 for increase in conservation aids. And so all of these adjustments will and above will use the full contingency of 400,000.
Fairgrounds, Ashley, was that for that?
Is that for a power pedestal thing that was, they had to move from like that first bathroom down to closer to the barns? I thought there was something with power pedestal.
And I'm thinking of that East Wing is because that I thought was like around 70,000, and I thought we were covering part of it. That would have been budgeted. So that can't be this. That would have been budgeted somewhere.
Fairgrounds.
Yeah, it was,
They're fairgrounds, not fair board.
right, but that was the former manager.
So we're in broom and dustpan mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I believe that a couple of those invoices came in after that person had left and were not anticipated.
But they were for buildings, or we really don't know exactly.
Yeah, they were for like repair, like maintenance type things that, to my knowledge, after talking to the support staff, were not run through a committee.
Oh.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay,
Then,
there's still more to come. Sorry.
right.
Okay, so after we had done all this reconciling, we also came into contention with Fund 100-40. So this is the Land Information Public Access Department. They are over expenditures by 104, or excuse me, expenditures are over revenues by $147,000. And so we're requesting a transfer from general fund balance because we are out of contingency funds. This is mostly related to contracted services were 196,000, which exceeded the budget by 121,000. And we only had a total revenue of 154,000. So we reached out to John Fitzel. I don't know if he's there or if he's on Teams. I don't know.
He's not.
Okay. So we had reached out to him and he said that he had presented this to the finance committee previously, and he gave us a very detailed description. So I'm going to read it verbatim because he said he would be available for the meeting. So, okay, so when he was looking at his budget originally, he was looking at the wrong numbers, thinking that he had more in contracted services line item than there actually was. And so he also thought that we had carried over from the previous year additional funding, which they had not. Then secondly, the base budget amount was approximately half of what was anticipated because the recorded documents being down dramatically. So the strategic initiative grant also was reduced by $60,000 from 70,000 to only 10,000. So he didn't actually get as much grant funding as was anticipated. Lastly, the cost of doing remonumentation over doubled per corner in price from the previous year. So he had said that he had presented the solution to finance to suspend the remonumentation project until the following year or two so they could get back on track and get funding coverage and restart the projects when sufficient funding became available. And he said there's also current legislation to increase the base budget grant by 75,000 in 2026 to help the smaller counties get caught up. And he attached some of the grant funding, the grant agreements, and we tried to ask him because he said that, you know, some of the funds would be coming in 2025, but we haven't seen those funds. So I'm not sure how else I can better explain this or put any
So you're-
questions to ease.
Naomi, you're telling us that he's anticipating there'll be more grant funds coming to offset the 147,000?
Right.
I remember, and I be remembering it incorrectly, but I thought when it was originally brought to our attention at finance, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 50,000-ish.
I was remembering 60 something.
It's not the first year this has happened. You might be remembering 2023.
Right, I can't, yeah, this isn't the first. I understand some of theirs comes in late and they anticipate, so they estimate, and I think a lot of our departments in fairness do that. Guesstimate what they're going to receive for a grant, and then if they get shorted 60,000 or whatever. But I mean, I almost think we need to check in when these grants do come, because then if something happens, then they're gonna have to make adjustments in their budget before waiting until just to pull it out of contingency the next year.
If I recall correctly, the same reasoning was given last year.
Yeah, until Brian, or until they said it, it was 2 years. I mean, this is the second, I believe.
think it might possibly be the third. We're walking a tightrope here with close, because Jamie and the HR manager had met with the zoning committee in closed session regarding that.
So
Oh, John's online. Hi, John. Is there,
Hello.
I presented your email and the need for 147,000 to be transferred from general fund balance. So I don't know if you can provide any more backstory about the grant or if funding will be received in 2025 or 2026 to make up the
Yes,
shortfall.
actually on both 2025 and 2026, we will be receiving the WLIA grant. I sent in the 2024 grant report, and that was approved today. So yeah, we've never had an issue in regards, excuse me, to the grants. There is legislation going through the pipeline right now, which is expected to pass, where they are planning on increasing the base budget grant by an additional $75,000. So I'm hoping that we can clear this in the red within the 2026 grant cycle once everything goes through. If the finance committee remembers, I did try to speak individually to you guys when this initially happened and we found out that I was over budget on things and tried to explain why. And I apologize for being late. I mean, I can answer any questions in regard to that. Anything that pops up that you guys need to know about, why, what happened, and our plan to remedy that and to make sure it never happens again.
So John, we're remembering that from last year, the shortfall was not as great as what we're seeing on the screen today.
Yes, correct.
And that's because I don't know, maybe I'm just slow. I'm not getting the why on that.
Okay, so there were basically three factors that came into play here. First of which is I made a mistake. I was looking at the wrong numbers and thinking that there was more in that line item for contracted services than there was. Secondly, our base budget grant was reduced literally in half from what we had expected. And our strategic initiative grant went from $70,000 down to $10,000. And thirdly, the cost of doing the remonumentation projects had more than doubled at that point. So the combination of those three things, basically, that's kind of where we're at. And knowing, excuse me, knowing what we know now, like I said, the dollar amount is being increased at the state level because of stuff like this, where the cost has went up so dramatically, and to help smaller, poorer counties get more in line with these other counties that have their remonumentation complete. That is our primary issue, is that cost of remonumentation. The excuse me, I apologize. Our where was I at? Our as I said, our base budget will be increased, or expected to increase, by an additional $75,000. Trying to think of what else they had proposed. They were increasing our potentially the strategic initiative and that's a big if the dollars go up for recorded documents, but right now they are historically low. And that's where a lot of those strategic initiative funds come from. They are increasing our education fund from 1,000 to 5,000. So yeah, I mean, overall, they're looking to dramatically increase the dollar amounts that are returning back to the counties to try and get everybody on the same even keel.
So John, when are these funds dispersed relative to when they get spent?
Well, usually we end up getting like our base budget grant, I'm sorry, the education grant comes usually in February, March. Our base budget grant typically comes mid-year, and our strategic initiative funds come when we sign off that we have followed our strategic plan that we updated this year for doing the remonumentation and updating those records. Which is usually, don't quote me on it, but I want to say it's November-ish, October, November-ish.
So on that last piece of funding is the one that came in short?
They all did. Well, except for the education grant. The education grant stayed the same, $1,000. But what we were expecting for base budget and strategic initiative both came up drastically short.
Because of funding from the state or
Yes.
because documentation from, it's
Yeah,
pretty
well-
tough to budget for something when you can't depend on your revenue until the end of the year and it changes on you.
Yeah, and as I said, the number one reason that we went over is I made that mistake of thinking that there was more in there than what there was. And I took full responsibility for that. And I was looking at those numbers wrong, and it was brought to my attention when Sky had come out, and we sat down and started looking at everything. And then later on, Jamie had gotten involved and we started pouring through everything. And yeah, I had made the mistake thinking that there was more in there than there actually was. That kind of kickstarted things. Projects were already in line to go. And like I said, our plan now moving forward was we are not doing any remonumentation projects because we did quite a bit last year. And we're keeping those dollars back to replace the funds that are going to be or potentially going to be taken from contingency or general fund to cover that overage until we get back into the black again, and then be able to move forward from there and just trying to keep our speculation. That's really all we can do is speculate what we're going to get from the WLIA grant, the strategic initiative grants, because it changes every year. Typically not this much, but because of a combination of things, it was just reduced that much. Now, a
So
couple
when-
other
when you-
things. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just had a follow-up question. When you said the state accepted the 2024 grant report, are you saying that they accepted the increase in expenses and they're going to reimburse the county that? Or is that coming out of general fund no matter what?
No, that would have to come out of general fund no matter what. They're not going to reimburse us for that because that's what we went over. I went over. Basically what they did was acknowledge that we have met their approval for what we spent. What the state wants to see, DOA wants to see, is that we spent the dollar amount that they gave us. Because if we don't, they will allow us to carry over those funds another year or however long we need to spend it. They just want to make sure that the money they're sending us is spent according to our plan, which they, again, had signed off on today once they sent everything in.
Okay, and then just one other question, because I guess I'm following along Chair Coggins asking when the reimbursements come in. I'm seeing that the contracted services line has already been overspent again for 2025 here in June. So is that just because we're waiting on a reimbursement that doesn't come till November?
Yes, we are waiting on reimbursements that will come later this year. Also, the new grant that we have, if you remember correctly, we got the DMA grants this year. Those won't come until either end of the year or first part of next year, and those were taken out of the contracted services. Those were covered 95%. So we will get reimbursed for those. And the dollar amounts were pretty significant coming back.
John, it's Jim. Walk me through the contract. What I'm reading here is the contracted services exceeded the budget by 121,000 and change.
Yes.
So,
The-
I'm assuming that's the monumenting that you did, but if they're okay, walk me through how you guys contract that, because I'm trying to get my head wrapped around how that tripled.
We basically bid it out and we put an RFP out for a specific township to say, okay, like this last year we did the south half of Lawrence and we finished off Atlanta, and we put an RFP out for those. We get bids back, then the committee opens up the bids. We pick typically the lowest bidder. If there's a issue with that particular bidder, then we have the ability to, go the next level up to assign that contract to a good firm. If we've ever had an issue with a firm or their references come back negative, or, there's been issues, we don't necessarily have to go with them. It just has to get approved by our committee.
Okay, so what added the cost here? I'm trying to understand this, is it just strictly from a reimbursement standpoint? Because how I'm reading it is that your contracted services exceeded the budget. So if you had a service that was contracted from a contractor, how did they come in this far out of whack?
Well, the previous year when we did remonumentation, the bids for each corner typically came in at about between $300 and $400 a piece. When they came in for Atlanta, it was almost $1,000 per corner. Lawrence, because I knew we didn't have enough money in that for doing the whole project, and that was 2 years ago when we started it, that project bid came in at well over $120,000 for it. So we broke it in half, trying to get the remonumentation done with that township, but doing it in a way that we'd hoped the numbers would match. Excuse me. And again, unfortunately, I thought there was more in there than what there was, and it wasn't. So yeah, we went over budget on that.
Well, and I get that, John, but I'm still trying to, why would if someone bid a job and you had a quote from them and you accepted them on that bid, I'm just having a hard time with this, because when someone comes in and it's that high, there had to either be some other circumstances that came up that the committee would have had to approve to go over this, or they just charge you guys whatever they wanted to.
That's basically what they do, is they charge us, what there's, you would think that there'd be some extenuating circumstances, like it was just horrible conditions, or that there was difficult to get to off the road stuff, and that's why the bid was so high. But that's what it came in at. And again, I thought the money was there to cover that, and it wasn't. But we've never seen it double like that. And I've got the RFPs from previous years to show, what we paid. This was the first year that it has went that high. I've never seen it. So again, when we budgeted for it, I did not expect those numbers to be what they were.
And their bid, when you take a bid from a firm, they have the ability to charge more? Or how does it bid? Is it per marker?
It's per marker, and they charge what they feel it's going to cost them to do. We don't
get a bid from somebody on this type of a thing and they can just charge you whatever they kind of want, is what I'm hearing, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's a crappy deal.
We don't set the cost per corner because we'd never get any bids. It's basically an open bid that says, okay, what's it going to take for you to do this project? And I can remember only one instance about 3 years ago or 4 years ago where we had one bid that came in substantially lower than the rest, and we started checking everything as far as their references, and I called the people that they had listed, And we were told that they would never go with them again. I mean, and I kept documentation of it so that I could present it to the committee. And they agreed. So we went with the next one up, which was significantly higher, but still not $1,000 a corner. This last RFP that we had, Morgan and Parmley or Russ Surveying came in and it was well, just shy of $1,000 a corner, and they were one of the lower ones.
But you mentioned open bid, so you didn't have a firm rate for doing the township.
No,
You had a kind
no,
of an estimate.
yeah. We get an approximation of what it took. So we went off of what the previous values were. You know, we expect a certain percentage of increase, but nowhere near what this came back at.
Nobody gives firm bids for doing a township. They just leave it open-ended. Is that what I'm understanding? Because otherwise they really don't know what they're getting into until they get into it.
Right. And then we'd never get any bids on it. We'd never have them doing the projects, or we'd get very poor work. And at this point, that's the last thing that we need right now, because we've got a good system going, again, minus my screw up. It's been working for us. We've had very good success with our remonumentation efforts. We've come a long way. DOA is very happy with us. And I think most of the counties are kind of in that same boat, which is why they're trying to increase those dollar amounts to get everybody up on the same page.
We have any other questions? Jeremy? Terry? Jim?
Oh, I
So as part of the resolution for the exceeding budgets, this language for the general fund transfer for the 147 is also in that same resolution. Thank you, John.
Yes, thank
No
you,
problem.
John.
I'll be here till the end of the meeting, so that if there's any other questions whatsoever, I'll be more than happy to answer.
I'll move on to the last bucket if you guys are ready.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this last table here, last meeting, you guys approved, the committee approved the resolution for expenditures that exceeded budget by 10%. These have enough revenue to cover their expenses, so they don't need any contingency funds or any additional funding from anywhere else. It's just that their actual expenditures exceeded budget by 10%. So these first three, so I'm gonna make sure I say this correctly. These first three, ambulance equipment, jail maintenance, and the tree program, originally needed contingency funds. And so now they don't, because we were able to find some receipting that wasn't correctly allocated in the correct year. So that brought them down. So their revenues were sufficient for their expenditures. So now they just fall in this bucket. So that's these first three. Ambulance equipment, they exceeded their budget, and then jail maintenance exceeded the budget by, and they're amended, these are the amended expenditures, so these are the total expenditures. So ambulance is over by roughly 1,000, jail maintenance is over by roughly 2,000, the tree program is over by roughly 5,000, 4,000. And then the victim service specialist, this one is we used, so the sheriff's department had additional revenue, and so we transferred that revenue, excuse me, I'm saying it backwards. the victim service specialist had additional revenue, so we transferred that additional revenue to the sheriff department. And so with that transfer, it bumped their expenditures over the 10% of what was budgeted. But so their revenues still cover their expenses, but we were able to use their excess. And so that bumped their expenditures over 10%. That one makes sense?
Yep.
Okay. And then these last two, these ones are the new, newly added to this list after we had done more reconciliation of the funds. The ATV patrol went over their expenditures by roughly 4,000. And then the ADF went over and total 121,000. So for the ATV patrol, we added notes here. The budget increased from previous requests, and there was an additional mileage request that was added, and it was, let's see, from last report, it was an increase of $223. So it wasn't a lot, but we wanted to note that change. And then the last one for ADF, we noticed an error. There was a credit to expenses that was booked that should have been booked as a revenue. So it increased the expenses, but the net total between revenue and expense wasn't actually affected. But the overage of expenses for these last two buckets changed from our previous approval. Did I explain that right? Did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's it. So this third bucket is another resolution to approve expenditures over 10%. Any additional questions on those?
Anybody? I guess not.
All right. So I think the resolutions are in your packet, and with no further changes, I think, I don't know the next steps, so if you need anything else from me, let me know.
Thank you. So first, we'll entertain a motion for the resolution to approve the 2024 contingency and general fund transfers.
I move to approve the 2024 contingency and general fund transfers resolution.
We have a second. By once. This is money that's already been spent last year.
I know, I was just reading this whole thing here before.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, it has to, yeah, the budget has to be done right. I'll second.
It's like a,
So we can move on to the board and the board can see what's going on.
okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of the resolution to approve 2024 contingency and general fund transfers, signify by saying aye.
I,
Opposed? That motion carried. Item 6, resolution amending 2024 budget. We'll entertain a motion for that as well.
I'll motion to approve the amending the 2024 budget resolution.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Is there any discussion regarding this resolution?
Find it any other one? Did I zip?
No,
It actually came up first. It was right after the,
Higher.
Oh,
it's on
and I skipped.
page 8.
Skip down to the other one.
Or page 9, my mistake.
Oh, this is the amending.
Yeah. Okay. Those in favor of approving the resolution to amend the 2024 budget signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Who's that carried? Okay. Thank you, Noemi.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna drop off.
Missy, your turn again.
Okay, so in your packet, you got the first quote, that Rebecca and I received. And in the packet, they had Fiddler, on as an option. Since then, we've got an updated quote. So today, I'm really not asking to approve dollars. More so just to proceed once Rebecca and I get nailed down what we need. We did have one question, unanswered question that we possibly might have to put Fiddler back on the contract. But we did receive an updated contract that they lowered the overall annual to 28,000 because I had called her and I digging into it. Currently, the county pays almost 18,000. We'll just round it for reference sake. 79% of that cost comes out of the treasure budget and 21% comes out of the land and that's the access, excuse me. So the updated contract, she had on there another service that we were thinking, told was included in our general. So we really don't have these details nailed down to approve a dollar amount. We would like to get a contract for Rich to review and then be properly approved. There's two other pieces that on the contract that hasn't changed, and that is the municipality portion. And that's not going to change. Each municipality will be charged an annual fee. So there is no cost for that to the county. So still kind of working through, are we just going to build a municipality? Or are we gonna just get the invoice and then reimburse from there? There's some details we're working on as far as that goes. The bottom, the one-time service fee. Again, we're thinking we don't need this Fiddler training. And Fiddler is, it's like interacting. Well, right now, Rebecca basically does that manually, that piece of it. What's in question is for efficiency's sake, right now, she's got a lot of changes. For example, to the loggers who have multiple parcels, she can change a name and an address on 300 parcels at once instead of going into each individual one. So that's the piece that's kind of in question in our mind. Overall, even with the lower rate and possibly adding back on Fiddler, we're still under that 31.5 for the annual fee. So that's a high ball figure. The details will be a little bit different. But we did talk to John for the one-time training for the county and the municipalities about using grant funds. So hopefully that will work out where grant all of the 27.5, part of it, however that would work out budget wise. Those would be funds that would be spent in 2026. So us upgrading to this web-based program that we don't have a choice, we would start in 2026 through the summer. By the fall, the municipalities would be able to log on. So starting in December of 26, they would be web-based collecting their taxes, where now it's a desktop version that they are sunsetting. So we really don't have a choice in this matter. But I was surprised to see that we're going from 18,000 up to 30. So I think that's why she lowered a little bit, some comparison to other counties our size. So I guess really I just need the approval that once Rebecca and I nail down the services that we're going to need, I get a contract for Rich to review and then present back to you guys.
Okay, so Fiddler is a company or is this gonna be purchased through Land Nav?
It's through it's part of Land Nav, kind of that whole, my understanding,
So they're gonna charge us or sell us the program, or is it just a subscription?
So the subscription is that 30,000 or whatever dollar figure, we finally narrow it down to. And then the Fiddler, or this other piece, they're like add-ons. That right now we're not using that service. They put it on our quote and we're like, we don't use that service. So let's get that off there. And that's when I was asking, like, we're getting quite an increase to go from a desktop version to.
Software as a service or
Right.
cloud-based service.
Right. So actually today Rebecca and I were back on with, our representative, and so we were asking the questions, because it's web-based, how much are you down? And they're telling us like 99% of the time, because they're using Amazon Web. That's probably one of the best services. So
it's 23 is from reading this down on the bottom,
yep, that's the one-time cost.
40, okay, but that's gonna be per year?
No, one time. So it's the upgrading and training.
They want 27.5 to put this in place. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, it's a one-time service.
After that, they want 30,000 to 38,000 by year 5.
And we asked the question, when we sign this contract, is the contract for like year to year, or are we locked in for 5 years? We would be locked in for 5 years. Between now and then, I would strongly suggest we maybe look at other options. There is other options out there that are cheaper. But at this stage of the game, right now, we're too close to get that started and still be out of Land Nav by the time they're sunsetting their desktop.
Problem you got is you're gonna have 28,000 into it, and then, so they got you hooked.
Right.
So that you're not gonna want to switch. 28,000 is what irritates me more than the per year subscription. To put it in place.
Yeah.
So that they can collect a subscription from us.
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm saying.
Yep. It's the implementation cost.
Yeah, they gotta come up.
And we don't have.
That's the part that's eligible for the grant funding.
Correct. And
Implementation,
Yeah, the 27.5 is eligible for the grant funding.
and the other 5,000.
that
I
was,
think you needed that.
well, at this point, we don't think we do. We'll have a confirmation when Rebecca gets the answer. Can she bulk change parcels?
Because that's the biggest efficiency driver.
For her, yes. And my understanding, she's telling me, the loggers change their business names, so every time there's a name change. So,
What do you think the implementation's going to? Any idea what you think that's gonna be? Extensive, I guess I should say.
it's,
I mean, what comes with that? I mean, are they just the software, they're installing it, and I guess walk me,
Right.
give me the dummy version.
We'll still get the customer service, you know, and the troubleshooting that we get now. So it's basically uploading our information from the desktop into the cloud. We're not gonna have to sit there and manually enter in our taxpayers, our parcels. They're taking it from point A to point B for us. That's part of the implementation and upgrade. And going forward, our municipalities are going to have the same visual. And Terry, you know that it's gonna look the same at our municipality level as we're gonna see at the county level. So when our municipalities are calling, it's gonna be easier us to walk them through if they're having an issue, where now it's a little bit different because the municipality level and the county level don't look the same.
So one of the issues I've had with contract with vendors and particularly software vendors is that once you upload your information into the cloud, it makes it incredibly difficult to switch vendors. So one of the questions that I would have about this is, what is the exit? How can we exit? And, you know, with the rep, ask the question, how do we get our data back? And I think that's actually really salient because I think we have another line item, number 10, that deals with a company that had control of our data and we weren't able to get it back.
Right.
So,
And then the other thing is the municipality side of it. So are the county, we're gonna make that optional for the municipalities to pay
They
for?
have no choice. So they have no choice.
So if we do this, they have to do it too. I don't wanna get into a situation, here's where I'm going with this. We bought a whole bunch of voting machines.
This is not that, I can tell you that right now.
No, but there's a couple counties that chose not to use them later on, whatever, and we paid for it out of ARPA funds. And in their contract, they were supposed to reimburse if they didn't use them. Well, that hasn't happened. But I don't want to get in a situation where we're paying for every municipality's licensing here and then, you know,
Have some
that's
No,
another 12 or whatever $1,000 it is.
right. So that top number one, that is our cost. That is ours. The number two is what the municipality's cost is. So no matter what, let's say number two isn't even on that piece of paper, we're still paying the number one. Because we have in that annual subscription, there's multiple programs, let's say, because it's property assessment, it's treasurer's collection, it's
Dog license, is that in?
that's part of it, and that is one of the goals that the county clerk will have their own login to get the information for dog license. Yes. Yes, that was a priority of ours as well, to be more efficient between our
Gonna
office.
go with animal control as well.
But like a municipality can't opt out of this. They can't be like, you know what, Missy, no, we're good.
Yeah.
Paper and pencil.
There is no choice.
Okay.
So right now, there is 6 municipalities in Russ County that Michelle Myers inputs their data like our municipalities. There is conversations right now of an annual fee plus a per parcel cost going forward. Because right now, in my mind, we're taking man hours from the county to do the municipalities' work. So that was a red flag to me very early this year.
What if they refuse and we end up
And
having,
they will be invoiced.
what if they say, we didn't approve this, county went ahead and did it, we're not doing it.
Honestly, they don't have a choice or they can't collect
They're
taxes.
not gonna be able to collect taxes.
There is no opting out of this.
And I'm totally with Jeremy on the uploading in the data. I don't want to get in another situation like we're trying to get out of right now.
Right. And we did tell our representative today that we actually had a finance meeting. There might be follow-up questions. So I will ask what's the exit strategy if we choose down the road to get back out of it?
And please, someone remind Rich that needs to be in writing if we do go into contract with them on how we're going to retrieve our data.
And we kind of asked that question, like, okay, let's say 3 years in and we decide, or the board decides, you know, pursue other choices. We did kind of ask that opt-out question, that would be something that would be negotiated if we went to them and said, hey, my board said we need to get out of this contract and we would rather have another service. So I think it's an option. It's probably a hairy deal, but yes, I agree. It should be in that contract laid out.
The salesperson doesn't want to tell you about that option. Sure.
No, but we asked, you know, so, but I will definitely ask the exit strategy and the language. So more details to come, but basically it's just to pursue getting something for Rich to review to start.
I don't think there needs to be an approval here. I just need, I think it needs to be brought back next month.
Yeah, it's too vague right now to take any action on, I think.
Right, right. And I didn't need an answer today financially. But I do want it to talk about it because pretty soon we're talking budgets and this is a significant change
Right.
in both the treasurer and the land information public access.
Well, Rebecca had brought it up at the zoning and land info meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
All these software companies are improving their pricing. Say it from their perspective.
a little more background on it, wasn't it? The way Rebecca explained it, it was kind of a mom and pop operation. They sold out now. And new owners in town, and we're gonna optimize our profitability based.
Would go with that reasoning because she's been around since 1997, so I'm pretty sure she's pretty versed on like that history.
So,
Yeah, it's kind of like just QuickBooks too. They're really pushing online version versus desktop.
No, it's all going that way. The data is ostensibly safer, but then you have all kinds of questions about data ownership, data retrieval, availability. It's kind of a quagmire.
Okay. All right, we'll get a contract. Our representative is going on maternity leave too, so we're all, like, we have that deadline too that we're trying to work on. Which, not that we couldn't get serviced if she was gone, but we're well aware of her deadline and ours as well. So.
any other questions?
Just had a quick question. 6% a year increase seems awfully steep.
I asked about that too. And it's just their business plan to make sure they're not keeping up with inflation and cost and that kind of thing. I did ask that.
So that's their problem, not ours.
I know,
You know.
but yes, I did.
No, you're doing a
I
great job with that.
I was well aware of the 6%, which to me it seems a little bit higher, but. I gotta go,
Right.
sorry.
Okay. So Tech 84, the 3-year maintenance or contract.
All right.
We're not number 8.
Skipped 8.
8.
Oh, good grief. My apologies. I pressed 2 lines at once. Tourism budget. That was from Mr. Undershoots.
Yes, yep. Okay, so this one is pretty self-explanatory. I put the entire explanation in the transfer request form. So essentially, the Tourism and Economic Development Committee has approved a 16-hour-a-week economic development contracted position. We are a little bit short in the contracted services line, but we have this extra money in our extra help line. But according to our financial procedures manual, if we're moving anything from wages into general expenditures, we have to get finance committee sign off. So that's what I'm asking for today. So we are short $13,790 in the 217 special projects line, but we can pull that from the extra help line, which is the 115 line. Looking for your guys to sign off on that. Otherwise, all of the funds are within the budget. We just need to make it up with that line. And we are not planning on having the specialist this year because we have the economic development consultant.
Wanted this brought on?
Mr.
Agenda shoots? Well, absolutely not. I'll never make a move. Back to committee.
So it's just it's a line item
Yeah, because
move.
we're moving something that was allocated for wages into general expenditures, then that automatically triggers the policy that finance has to approve that.
What part of staying within his budget doesn't he understand? If it wasn't in his budget, then he shouldn't be moving it. He should be bringing the extra money back to the general fund when he doesn't spend it for that line item. Listen.
All right, any other questions? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the line item transfer in the tourism budget for extra help to special projects to fund economic development contractor.
Make the motion to approve the line transfer tourism budget.
Do we have a second?
I'll save Supervisor Meyer the grief and second that motion.
Okay.
Softies.
Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving the line item transfer in the tourism budget, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I.
Thank you. A unanimous vote. All right, now we're at the 3-year maintenance contract.
All right, the sheriff's department and jail division is seeking approval on the contract here with Tech 84 Intercept whole body scanners. It's our yearly maintenance contract. We have 2 quotes. One is for a year and one is for 3 years. The 3-year one would save for $1,000 over those 3 years. Our jail budget projected to be under budget this year because of a significant reduction in out of housing. This shouldn't require any budget amendment. Money makes sense to get your contract done once instead of every year.
So what kind of maintenance does this cover? What,
Should cover parts services and software upgrades.
okay, IT maintenance. Okay,
Also covers radiation safety. So I'm sure the machines work.
It's not a very heavy radiation heavy piece of equipment. If you ate today, you took about the same amount of radiation from your food that you would from this. It's fairly safe.
Oh, I see it. Tom, you said it should be a 1 year and a 3 year?
Yeah, I have a 1 year and a 3 year. I don't. 1 year is 11,225. The 3 year comes in at 32,700. Just under 1,000 savings for those 3 years.
Terry, didn't emergency services forward the 3-year option?
Yes,
Under recommended?
yes, because again, it has to do with prepaid expense, but it all has to come out of paid out of cash now. It goes in prepaid expense.
And then we carry it on the books essentially for 26 and 27.
And
So
it's allocated the expense each year. And that was within the budget.
Yes, sir.
My only question with this is if Dale ever goes through or whatever. That's not gonna affect that in any way where this, I mean, we'd have time left on this contract that wasn't used and
The unit is, it's itself.
foresee that being transferred to a
Yes.
new facility. I mean, it's new enough.
Yes.
It's portable, right?
It's not portable
Okay.
within like when you say
It's not like on
human means, but it's movable. Yes, we can move that to another facility. I think the design team is trying to make sure that they have enough room in the intake area there to accommodate this better than we can up there right now.
And as we're exploring this question, is there cost associated with moving it? Like, do we have to hire a contractor or somebody to move it for us?
I don't have that information. I guess it would be based on.
Probably would.
I think probably yes, but that would be in addition to this one way or the other.
Right. But remember, the jail isn't going to be done tomorrow either to move it anyhow.
So we're looking at a 25, 26, 27 contract maintenance.
Yeah.
We'll
We
have
don't
to
know
come
when
up with
that'll
a
be
contract
done.
again before we move it anyways.
any further questions?
I'll make the motion to approve the Tech 84 Intercept full body scanner contract for 3 years.
We have a second. Now from Mr. Meyer.
I'll second everything.
You haven't seconded.
I don't want to take the limelight away from other individuals in this committee.
I'm having fun getting my name on that piece of paper.
All right.
I'll second it.
All right. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor of the 3-year maintenance contract with Tech 84 for the sheriff's department, signify by saying aye.
I,
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Okay, update on our previous ambulance billing company.
Okay, so Tom paid what he believes is the final invoice via credit card this week, get the subscription. And then he is setting a training session early next week, either Monday or Tuesday for himself, finance. I'll sit in if I can, and then his kind of like backup ambulance Medicaid billing person. So we should be able to have the tutorial on how to get into the system. They'll show us kind of how the data is organized. We're hoping it's via Excel so we can just pull it all out. And then he is working with them as well to get our data in our possession so we never run into this problem again. So we are making huge progress on that.
Okay, that's encouraging. Any questions?
good work.
All right, thank you. That's huge. All right, changes to chapter 8 of the financial procedures manual.
Okay, so that's me. So this is kind of just some cleanup from what the board approved with the compensation plan, but I'll kind of go through the explanation a little bit. So prior to having an HR manager or any really set HR department, the finance department handled a bunch of things related to human resources. So some of that language that is more human resource related was in the financial procedures manual. So we have some duplication of language. For example, some of the language that's listed in the manual is also talked about in the handbook and in our Rusk County ordinances as well. And then also some of this language is contradicting itself as well, thus the need for the changes in this financial procedures manual. So the changes I am recommending is only this front paragraph that you see in chapter 8. So it states that the ad hoc interviewing committee approves new hires and for appointed positions that the approval comes from the county board. This is true, but our ad hoc interviewing committee is all addressed in our Rusk County ordinance and in the employee handbook. And it is also set by Rusk County ordinance that approval for all appointed officials comes from the county board. So again, by having language in here, we're really contradicting ourselves and having duplication where we're having to update different spots. And that's a lot of times we've been finding is getting missed when we update one spot or another. So it just makes sense to remove that because it's already in our ordinances that that stuff is spoken for. Also, the financial procedures manual states that the personnel committee approves and signs all payroll notice changes. This has not been happening since I have been here for the last year and a half. HR signs those along with the employee and the department head. And then the language that would still be staying in there says the finance director audits them and approves them to make sure that they're accurate. And that is still accurate to be kept in that financial procedures manual. Lastly, it states that all wage adjustments and reclassifications must be approved by related oversight committee, personnel committee, finance committee prior to approval by county board. Last month in May, the county board passed resolution 31-25, which was setting that compensation plan in our employee handbook that specifically spells out the process for each of these and what needs to be followed. And then that comp plan went into the handbook. So in order to avoid confusion, duplication, contradicting information, inconsistent policies and practices, I'm just requesting that we remove that struck language from the financial procedures manual since those topics are addressed in the handbook and or the Rusk County ordinances.
Questions?
Why wasn't the personnel committee, I guess, signing off on payroll change notices? Do we know? Was that something we addressed some other time?
No, that changed when you had the contracted HR manager.
I think that was a motion at a committee. Or not a motion, but a discussion then maybe.
We haven't changed the wording for that. Is that in the personnel handbook? Also?
Remember when I used to bring that big folder
I don't,
We would have to stay and sign and sign and sign and sign.
Yeah,
I don't really know.
because I didn't know we stopped doing that.
I don't know the purpose of that, cause I mean, did they ever catch errors? Cause are you going back and auditing that to the wage scale? Like, were they reviewing every personal change form to the wage scale and to like the pay codes in the system and to all of that? Otherwise, aren't you just essentially signing a piece of paper?
No, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying it changed when we had that contracted position.
I don't think HR signed it. That was again before you had HR, so personnel signed it in place of HR. So I think the line used to say like personnel / HR.
Ellie always brought them too.
It must have been past practice before that or something. I don't remember.
Any other questions? Right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the changes to Chapter 8 of the Financial Procedures Manual.
I'll make the motion to approve the changes to chapter 8 of financial procedure.
All right, we have a second.
Second, it.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Haven't broken the streak yet.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the changes to Chapter 8 of the Financial Procedures Manual signify by saying aye. Opposed? Carried. Oh, possible changes to Chapter 17 of the Financial Procedures Manual, specifically grants. Well, I can start a little bit and then you can, after I muddle it up, you can clear it up. This stemmed from last month when we had our short notice 10-minute county board meeting. When the sheriff's department was notified that they qualified for that grant for $30-some thousand. And so our financial our financial procedures manual states that to accept that and change the budget, we need to have board approval. And so this change would allow the board chairman to accept grant funds. And then at the next county board meeting, we could adjust the manual or adjust the budget to accept it. It's really no different than when there's an expenditure that's out of line and it's already happened. And then it comes to the board after the fact for approval. So now you can clean up my mess.
No, you did a great job. So, by state statute, you cannot delegate the board's authority to amend the budget. What you can delegate is the internal approval process when the county is awarded grant funding. So in chapter 17, the language states that before a department head can even apply for a grant, they're supposed to be going to their oversight committee to get approval to apply for the grant, okay? So we're essentially kind of doubling up on all of our permissions here. So if the committee approves a department to ask for a grant, you'd have to ask yourself, why would the board then not accept that grant? So what you can delegate, like Chair Coggins said, is you can have the board chair, you can have corp counsel, you could have admin coordinator, you could have finance director, whoever you guys want, accept a grant. What I had proposed to Chair Unterschutz was like, set a threshold that you're comfortable with. So if you're comfortable with 50,000, 100,000, $1 million, whatever that threshold is, you can set that. So if it's $50,001, you might want that to come to the board because you're not comfortable with one, person accepting that kind of money on behalf of the county. The other thing that I would recommend, is set a dollar amount, yes, but I would also put in some kind of language that says, for example, grants with significant policy or operational implications as determined by Corp Council might also need to come to the board. So if it's, I don't know when this would ever happen, but if it's maybe a controversial grant, or it's a grant that might commit the county to something political, I don't know, I'm just saying, as determined by Corp Council, that kind of language then could shoot it to the board regardless of the size of the grant.
The immediate question I had was, does it also give the chairman or whoever we designate the ability to reject the funds? Or would that, how would that, is that even a worry in this situation?
No, and I would say that, the chairman or whoever is delegated shouldn't be able to override. Because if the oversight committee said, yes, go for this grant funding, please, I don't think that person should be able to say, no, I don't want that.
Okay.
And in our packet somewhere.
Well, no,
And I say that,
it's just a discussion item.
Okay.
It's not a resolution or a rec.
Wanted anything?
Yeah, this is from the chair.
Oh, next item.
I can, sorry, I should have had that up.
no, as long, I think as long as that, you know, because what we don't need is some kind of an accidental veto power.
Right.
And because we could put ourselves in a situation where, you know, somebody like HHS, let's say, is expecting grant money and then just never accept the grant.
So this, okay,
So
so
it's,
we have this in place now.
so this, yep. So this is what you have now. It's those first two paragraphs where we are running into the procedural problems.
I don't ever get anything filed in my office.
Tanya just gave you a stack the other week. Oh, they're on her desk.
Have you seen a contract/grant approval form? Sure.
I bring them down to you all the time.
I mean, this year, they're not filed in my office.
Yes, they are.
That's an interesting sentence there in the second paragraph. And
The last one? The 13 majority.
that there have been times where grants have been turned down. And I'm really curious what the circumstances
So am
were
I.
around that.
That seemed odd.
That seems like something we need to fix because we're accidentally throwing money away if we're doing.
Well, are we, or are there strings attached to this that sometimes
Right.
people may not see
But I
until it's went through a third committee? I don't know.
think your point, Ashley, was that, you know, say the board chairman cannot turn down a grant per se. And I mean, it might be having to do with personal
Thoughts on,
biases or
Yeah.
whatever. And that, you know, the grant is fine, but it could be, it removes the political stuff somewhat.
Sure.
That and personal bias or anything like that.
Right.
Well, I think that's a good point.
I mean, there could be something tied to this grant too, where you accept a grant and it automatically requires another employee to be hired.
Yeah. Some hidden costs, right?
but
But
why would a committee ever have approved the application for the grant? Then I think the problem becomes with either the committee for approving that without going to the board, or did the department head not fill
I
in?
think your argument is valid. If you're approved in the first place and we're putting a second layer approval that is a roadblock in the way. I think you're right there.
So maybe you flip it then. Maybe departments can apply for whatever grants they want and then they come for approval. It's a double layer of approval that's leading to, like you said, the last minute meetings being called. And they
Bypass finance, it goes through its oversight committee, bypass finance, and it goes to county board. Don't hash it out there. That would take one. I mean. Going to the full.
As far as applying for the grant you're talking.
No, accepting it.
The county board's gonna refer it back to finance.
Not if we take it, I haven't seen one yet that wasn't pretty much cut and dried, but obviously there has been for someone to put that line in there. I don't know why.
DYA.
Well, in my forestry days, we had a lot of grants. A lot of grants. And so what happened was finance really wanted to oversee the grants, which what we were doing was finishing the work and then submitting, having them look it over. Correct? When I was in there. And so that's when it all kind of changed because they wanted to really get a handle on these grants because there's a lot of them between all the departments, which is a good thing.
So where does this go from here?
I think Phil wanted it on for discussion and then 'cause he knew he couldn't be here today. And then maybe ask him if he wants it back next month.
Touch base with Phil on this.
I mean, you're right. That second sentence in the second paragraph has me all a little twisted out of shape too. Again, you have a department that's worked really hard to get a grant that went through their oversight committee. They're ready to get their funding. They're excited to get their funding, and then the board can't make a decision. And
That was a rare instance there. I mean, any other time, I think grants, if they're doing their due diligence, they should know about them way ahead of time.
right.
You'd think. But I think they found out about this kind of last minute anyway, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they gave them like a 14-day deadline or something to accept it and we had.
But on that one there, didn't we know about that one ahead of time?
Well, emergency services approved the application. Yeah, like we knew it was coming, but when we get the award package, someone has to sign for it and it has to be the board chair or the county clerk.
Because when you apply, you don't know that you qualify necessarily.
Right, because it was a competitive grant, so we weren't guaranteed that funding. And then it triggered a budget amendment because it increased the revenues in the sheriff's department by more than 10%.
All right.
Question.
I'll talk to Phil about it. We'll probably bring it back next month. Right. So the resolution of authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed 33,500,000, not 33,500. As my agenda says.
Is correct.
This is acting on Mr. Fisher's presentation.
Yes.
Where the rubber meets the road.
We already done the discussion. Should we just motion?
Well, I will ask if there's no. Proper is to ask for the motion first and then discussion. So I'll ask for the motion.
Resolution is already in here.
Pardon?
Resolution is already in. Packet.
Yes. Yes, it begins on page 19.
It goes to like page 30.
It's some light reading, but yeah, it's all there.
Light reading.
There's more.
Yeah, I like drafts.
It should have stayed Wisconsin, if that wasn't every, it'd be a little less work.
Which one? Yeah, it's on, thank goodness it's all the way. Somewhere here. I'll find it. I'll make the motion to accept a resolution authorizing the instruments and establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $33,500,000 general obligation promissory notes, as discussed by Bart earlier.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. for the resolution authorizing the issuance of establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $33,500,000 in general obligation promissory notes.
Mr. Chair, I would like to request a roll call vote.
I was gonna ask if there was any further discussion first.
Okay, well, when you get there, sorry if I jumped the gun.
That's okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none. We would like to have a roll call vote.
Mr. Vincent,
Yay.
Mr. Meyer,
No.
Mr. Wedwig,
Yes.
Mr. Coggins,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay. So that'll go to the county board next week. Thank you, Justin.
You just, yep.
All right, item 14. Request for reimbursement of up to $2,500 for the Wisconsin Conservation Congress budget line and responsibility.
Okay, this was approved by county board back in,
July of 24.
Okay.
and so the motion was just to pay up to $2,500. So the problem is, what are we paying? What budget line is it coming out of? We have no idea. I didn't put it in, it's up on, I did put it in the, yeah.
In the folder pen?
Yeah, so it's just a bill that they gave me, but actually I'm like, okay, what do I do with this?
Wasn't that to reimburse
Yeah, it's
so many people?
Wisconsin Conservation Congress Convention. So it was Roger Rail and Steve Teagues that presented this at county board. So they came back with the invoices for the Marriott Oshkosh hotel and meals and mileage. So what his balance was 421.35 for meals. I gotta take sales tax off of there and room. Then they had 456.8 miles, so I'd have to use the 65.5 on it. Right around,
Improve that here.
we approved this in June at county board. If you remember right, Phil made the motion to approve it, to approve paying them, reimbursing them. The problem is that I don't know what budget, we have no idea where to take it out of. I don't know where to pay it out of.
It's the county.
We approved this at county, we approved them at county board. It was Roger Rail that was speaking on it.
He came in and talked.
Oh,
Yes, he did.
Remember.
Yep, and Phil Schneider did the, I don't know who did the second, I can't remember anymore, but I can remember. There was no details to it, so just had no place to, I have no place to pay them. I don't know what to do. So it's gotta go back to county board with the we'd like to do a resolution on it and go back to county board with it on Tuesday so that because actually it was your, county board's approval. We just need the details.
There's two things that we are asking for you to clarify in this resolution. The first is what reimbursables. And the second is, what is your funding source? So for instance, I think what Honey flagged initially was that there's tax on here.
Yeah, and we,
Don't pay tax.
in meals, I mean, one meal was $7.50, one was $91.65, one was $56.20, one was $17.70, $20.90.
How many days was
I
it?
almost thought they said they were just looking for.
Thought we covered
Room and mileage, I thought.
I thought we approved we set a dollar amount, I thought.
Okay,
Meeting.
it was up to 2,500. Is that,
320.
is that forever? 2,500, is that per year?
Just for the one time?
I thought
That's
there was
what-
also discussion where that could come from. Nothing at all?
Jared, are you volunteering? Take it out of your budget.
That's a good idea.
Conservation.
So what was the actual total? Just the four,
Or 2135 then is.
there's some mileage too?
Yeah, another 456.8.
So what's the total?
I didn't do that part of it.
56.8. I mean,
They went, he has it right here. There's a map if you look at the bottom. I did, right there it is.
156 miles, not dollars.
Right, miles, I said,
Oh.
yes.
Okay.
It's like, what is it, 70 cents a mile or something this year?
5.5,
65 and a half.
right? Because it's on behalf of the board.
Then the IRS rate went up, yeah.
Yeah, I thought the IRS rate was 70 cents this year. So.
Anyone by chance go back and look at the meeting and see what the discussion was around it?
Yeah, it was like Connie said, it was hotel and village. And I believe the minutes reflect that as well. It just, when whoever made the motion didn't specify that in the motion.
And we didn't,
Specify a
They
funding.
didn't specify funding.
What
Is
department-
there a recommended,
so in other words, it's like 500 and some odd dollars, no,
probably 6?
Let's say 700.
40, 420, take the tax off, it's like 600 and some dollars.
What's the likely place that this would come from? Budget wise?
I don't recall ever doing something like this before without it being allocated where the money was gonna come from. Not saying it hasn't happened, but
Yeah.
a lot of times when stuff like this happens, it comes out of contingency and the dollars and a contingency for it.
Well, if we know where to budget for it, we can do it next year, but nobody was,
Is there any type of, what was it exactly was this for? What was it kind of?
for Wisconsin Conservation Congress Convention. And
Land and Water, we can pull it out of their grants.
So I don't think there's gonna be anything to pull, if you ask my honest
That
opinion.
was my funny for the day.
Yeah, that I left on the inside. So it said, the Wisconsin Conservation Congress and 5 Rusk County delegates spend money out of their own pocket to attend the annual conference. They're requesting Rusk County to support the delegates and reimburse them for lodging and mileage for the annual meeting. But this was approved a year ago. When was the annual meeting? Do you know?
they,
We done this
May 10th this year.
of this year? Oh, okay. And then the motion
Schneider,
Motion by Russell, seconded by Schneider to approve the request for reimbursement up to 2,500.
That's even a really high approval.
Well, they were figuring for 5 members though,
Oh,
and there's only 2 that attended.
Do they come from what department are they in again?
they're not.
This has no affiliation with
Rusty Department.
Yeah.
Part of the county.
Oh,
We're paying, they wanted people to attend this thing
On behalf of the county, basically.
for conservation purposes.
this is why this is a bad practice to start this.
Yeah.
I mean, not saying it wasn't a good thing that they went, but when you do something like this, then it turns into a snowball.
Mhm.
Pretty soon others are gonna start coming in and saying, well, I want to represent this and I'd like to go.
well, the big problem here is that we don't know where the budget's coming from. If there was a clear budget line item,
Wednesday.
we wouldn't be having this conversation, right?
Right.
is there like a market, is that marketing? Is that like, I mean, that's what we would have probably thrown it to in my other life, but
I think,
We take it out of tourism.
Sure, that's what I was thinking, tourism.
well, unfortunately,
Economic development.
with this line item transfer, you've just tapped out the
on.
tourism budget.
unintended consequences of their
Right.
finance. Oh.
I'm thinking if Schneider, if Mr. Schneider was involved, he probably wanted it to come out of forestry.
I mean, do we have to finish this today? Can this be punted till next month?
Probably want payment.
We can, I mean.
You're gonna take out,
What do you solve?
you're gonna take out meals because the resolution was only for,
Well, that's why she's here, because she's not making that decision.
No.
That's because.
Is there any type of a grant that we get around this type of thing at all? Whether it's land, water, is there any type of a grant that comes in from this? That's just not being used or something that could be,
Roland said, yes, we'll do it.
what's that?
No, I'm just looking at this, so passed 19-0, so everybody wanted them.
Voted for it.
I don't think my name's on there.
Oh, you
No.
Yeah, this would be your,
Jim, trust me.
I was distracted.
July 23rd. July 23rd of last year.
Gee,
Yeah.
I didn't think it was that.
Time flies, Jim.
So I'm not familiar enough with our GL codes and like where we're assigning money. Does anybody have an opinion of line item?
I would agree with Mr. Meyer on his contingency,
Contingency?
because I don't necessarily think it's right to assign this expense to a department when it had nothing to do with them, really.
Yeah, what, it should have been recommended by the department if you're gonna send it to a department, that's fair. So, I mean, unless there's,
For this year,
That's a one-time request, right?
no, is
Is
it,
that an ongoing thing that we approve there? Because the wording of that,
You mean like for the next 5 years, if it costs $500 a year, is what you mean?
no, or
2,500 a year.
2,500 a year. Did we unwittingly approve that going forward
well, it doesn't say indefinite, but it should have said for.
for the 2025? Yeah.
I think that was probably part of the I don't remember.
I don't either.
If it was the first time they had it. I'd say it's just that.
If they come,
I would view that, I took it as a one-time thing.
Yeah.
it doesn't say annually, it just says up to
Right.
$500.
You're right.
So, I mean, we could,
They wanted
It
again.
should have said for 2025 Wisconsin Conservation. That's,
so you're saying contingency because nobody else, none of the departments, this would be a surprise. And I'm feeling like it went 19-0 and these guys have every expectation that they're gonna get reimbursed. So I would,
how's county board budget looking?
it's right here, actually. Have it.
pass it over.
It was in our packet. It was in our packet.
So year to
Gotcha.
date, it's 30,000.
No, on the, on the.
Yeah. But I can look at it on the Z drive. To me, that helps me out better. I can tell you if we can align that, we could take it out of.
Have anything left over from elections? There's no more
Doing
elections
something,
this year.
know.
Ha ha ha, not happening. I'm restocking our stuff. Ooh, somebody's in there already. What is it? You, Ashley?
Well, it can always, if we make a recommendation, it's gotta go to board, right?
Mhm.
So we can say contingency. If people disagree, by the time we get to board, I guess.
Okay.
You could take it out of maybe expenses.
That's under county board.
If you go over, you can take it out of contingency. And then are they going on behalf of the board?
I'm just wondering for audit purposes, I'm not sure we should code that to county board because that's not a true
County board.
Right.
county board.
Yep.
The only reason I was thinking of that is because they went to
Right.
represent us, but
We'd still end up having to make a line item adjustment to the budget to do that.
hey,
I think it's cleaner going out of the contingency.
I don't like that precedent.
No.
I don't see a way around it.
But I think,
Next year you should budget for it somewhere.
or not,
Is there there's no line item for county board discretionary or promotional funds or?
I think if someone's gonna, nothing against what they did, it was great what they did. I don't want someone taken away from that, but if county's gonna be represented at something like this, it needs to be
It should be.
represented by county employees or officials. I guess it because of this.
Both of these are on the town of Atlanta board, both of these people.
Okay, so I can tentatively, I'll write the resolution with contingency. But then now the next part is, are you going to en masse approve this? Are you gonna strike some of these off?
I would recommend we strike the tax portion of it.
Well, and meals, because that wasn't in the original
Here, let me pull that.
thing.
And the other thing is, I
I
mean,
think they talked about that too.
we really don't have a choice on the mileage. And mileage, the room, and the room, yeah, I agree with Terry. Oh, he said it.
Meals and tax.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that would normally just come out of like if the county provided grants out to the community to do things like, let's say you have your little tourism shop and they want to do like a fundraiser and the county gives them $500. It would come out of a fund like that. It wouldn't come out of contingency or anything else. And since we don't have a fund like that, we've really kind of,
We have to do contingency.
yeah, we've rowed
Since-
ourselves up the river.
Right.
And really, the other option probably would have been tourism or economic development, but
Yeah, you give
not
them
a line item in there for that, yeah.
Yeah. And you spell it, it would be an actual budget line item at that point, or it would come out of some department able to talk to us about it. Instead of somebody coming straight to the board.
Or we could reimburse them, but that.
I don't like doing it, but I don't know that it sets a precedent. You know, we don't have to do it again if we rewrite a policy or if we just don't, we actually have the good conversation when we approve it.
Ashley's got to write a resolution so that we can put it to county board on Tuesday. That's part of our.
Dave?
Because I think they mentioned about meals or something like that, and they said they could their own thing. There was something about that, I think, when we discussed it way back.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
I think there was something, so I would say just go with what the resolution says.
So mileage or lodging and mileage?
Yep.
Okay.
That's what the resolution is, and we can't. I thought that was brought up and they said they do their own,
Asked me to.
they just wanted the mileage and the lodging and they would take care of the meals. And I remember something vaguely about that.
And like you said, Terry, that's what it says, so
And that's what I'm saying about the.
remembering the same as you.
Right.
You just can't reimburse them the tax. Oh,
Well, yeah, no tax.
Was this the restaurant you think, Connie? This? Okay.
Anchor imports the.
well,
Oh, it is. Okay.
Is it?
Is it?
Across Marriott.
It is, that's where they ate that.
Gotta be. That's not too hefty. Then you got taxes in a room, right? Or
Anchor Import's the name of the restaurant. Sure.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks good. We see
Yeah,
it.
so,
Must be.
so it's $198, no, $196 for the room. Plus whatever the mileage calculates out to be. Yes, and they rode together.
Mushroom Brazil. Looks good.
Okay, so I'll just confirm with you guys because I'm writing this on the fly so I can get it to Connie in the morning. So the Rusk County Board of Supervisors does hereby authorize reimbursement to the delegates of the Wisconsin Conservation Congress for lodging and mileage not to exceed the total verified amount submitted or $2,500, whichever is less. Be it further resolved that said reimbursement shall be paid from the contingency fund.
Short and
To be
sweet.
specific with, that it was the 2025.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I was reading just the conclusion paragraph. So
Yep.
yes, okay, so whereas the Rusk County Board of Supervisors at its July 23rd, 2024 meeting approved reimbursement to Wisconsin Conservation Congress Rusk County delegates for expenses up to $2,500 to attend the 2025 annual meeting. Whereas the original motion, minutes attached herein, so I'll put the minutes with this, did not clearly define the scope of reimbursable expenses or specify a funding source. And the delegates have since submitted itemized receipts to the county clerk's office, which have been reviewed for accuracy and eligibility by the clerk and are attached herein. Therefore, be it resolved that authorized reimbursement of lodging and mileage and lodging paid from contingency fund.
You're gonna put the dollar amount in there.
If, okay, are you gonna pay mileage at the IRS rate then?
That's what we typically do, don't we?
No, not for employees or constitutional officers. You pay us at 30 cents a mile, but you guys get paid at IRS.
Right.
So I'll just need some direction
if
on
you
that.
drive your own vehicle to a meeting, you get 30
Yeah.
to a meeting other than at the courthouse.
So if I drive my own vehicle, it's easier on my budget than if I drive a county-owned vehicle.
What?
Just what I said.
Your POV gets paid out at a higher mileage rate?
So my vehicle, it's 30 cents a mile if I drive mine,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
If I drive a county-owned vehicle, it's
70.
No.
67 cents a mile gets charged to your department for the vehicle usage.
Oh,
And that's
Vehicle.
because the fleet is an internal service fund.
oh,
So we
okay.
need to charge out the correct mileage, so we're not losing.
See, I'm
our-
always thinking, Brian, always thinking, because I need calendars.
Well, and the other reason we can't approve the meals, we don't know, I mean, even if we were to approve them for a board member at a conference,
Mhm.
we don't cover drinks.
Right.
It's set in stone what's covered per day, per meal.
Yeah.
So we don't know, I mean, we don't know what's in that. We don't know anyways. Yeah, so,
Well, and it wasn't approved to begin with.
exactly.
So that's, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the meal is a non-issue.
So pay them at 70 cents a mile.
No, it's 60. If you do the county board rate, it's 67.5, correct? Meeting rate,
67.
67, did it go up?
Well, we're not paying the IRS.
I'll have to double check. I don't know it off the top of my head.
It's on the
IRS.
form.
I thought it was 67.5 yet this year, unless it changed.
Yeah,
It's right on your form. Their payroll form,
payroll sheet.
their payroll sheet, yeah.
Well, we said we'd cover mileage, and as you meant the. For the, whatever the. Rate is my thought.
Payroll sheet.
It's the IRS rate is 70 cents.
Right.
70 cents that
It was-
the board's getting paid this year.
Yeah. 70.
It is?
Yeah.
It's that. Claim. And I got a county car, so it's not.
Okay,
Right.
so for lodging and mileage paid at the IRS rate, okay.
Lodging with no tax. Do you gotta put that or? you-
No, because we don't pay tax. Yeah, if
I
they,
know, But do we have to be more specific?
I don't think so, because if they had made the reservations through the county clerk,
Right.
would it have been,
And I couldn't remember. I brought it, I said to you, what do I do this? And you're just like, just let them do it themselves.
Well, they tried to.
Have me do it. And I can still probably call, yeah, we talked about it. It was a while ago with Ashley.
this is a long, well, why couldn't you do it?
Because when you and I talked about it, you're just like, just don't, yeah, I would not let them do it and then we'll reimburse.
Okay,
We kind of talked about it a little bit and it's like, okay, I mean, I can probably call up there and get things reversed if that's what I need to do. I can work on it if I need to.
May not happen.
Well, you probably need to ask their permission to do that if you're gonna. do
And
it.
he's
It's
okay with
there.
him, us not paying the tax. He's like, whatever.
Oh, you, Mr. Ale?
Okay, done.
if they were on the town of Atlanta board, why wasn't it tax exempt?
It
That's
wasn't
weird.
reserved that way.
I guess not, yeah.
No, they weren't,
It was,
They weren't a town of Atlanta employee.
not going on behalf of the town of Atlanta. I don't, they're both on there. I know they are.
Oh, so they attended as just general citizens? Oh, yeah, then that's why we shouldn't have, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
So remember us talking.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things going on, right?
Uh,
I remember it all.
So you need a motion to move this resolution to county board?
yeah.
yes.
To move.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
All right.
You're getting fast.
Keep the streak going.
I didn't want Terry to jump in.
Don't put a lot of pressure.
Any further discussion?
Get emotions ready today.
We got a pretty rousing animal.
Is there any more discussion? Okay. All in favor to approve forwarding to the county board request for reimbursement for lodging and mileage for the Wisconsin Conservation Congress. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, the budget report.
Jared's here. Do we want to take care?
I'm good with that. Is everybody else?
What we gotta do?
Thank you.
Move this.
It's just,
Which item is that?
it's called the addendum.
Is the close.
Oh,
Oh,
yes. Let's do that. So we'll move the the addendum will move up in the agenda right now. So I will do this. I gotta read it first and then get the motion.
And then ask for a motion and then do.
All right. So Weirgor ATV Bridge pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85 sub 1 sub G for conferring with legal counsel for the government body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. I have a motion.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
I will second.
Is that a roll call vote for that?
Yes.
Usually they let you say it is.
You can call it if you want, Brendan.
Okay, Mr. Mike,
Yes.
Mr. Wedwick,
Yes.
Mr. Vincent,
Yes.
You are.
I vote yes.
Now in closed session.
Are you okay? You don't get basketball? It was insane. No, I could.
You gonna step out for a moment?